know, right? It's possibility. It's possibility.
So Jordan, you're gonna have to figure out how to get your staff figured out. You got people like Mike Walker, who was totally, completely,
This thing is so
has
blown out of
no
proportion.
handouts, has no electronics. Now, Andy over here, she's got all kinds of handouts and everything. Who's gonna be the electronic key? Allow us to know the pictures.
I know,
We
I
need to do
wasn't
council
sure if we
chambers.
could do that.
Get together, come on.
Alright,
You gotta start the meeting.
let's do this, we've had 30 minutes there. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and call our work session to order. I'm gonna start with a quick review of tonight's agenda, per usual. I'll pause if there's any questions for staff, pose it at that time. We have a proclamation for the League of Women Voters this month. I'm just gonna say one thing on this, okay? I think this is a great proclamation. This has nothing to do with this particular proclamation. I am gonna ask counselors, though, to just be a little bit careful and hesitant as we look at proclamations and ask this body to do proclamations in the future. I've seen a lot of councils get sidetracked by doing too many proclamations, and then once you start doing proclamations, you tend to get more and more controversial proclamations, and then you start debating whether or not we should do this proclamation or that proclamation. And one thing I've enjoyed the most about this council is that we tackle the big and important issues that actually affect our community. And so obviously that has nothing to do with this particular one tonight, right? But I just want to kind of throw that out there as, we go down. I just don't want to see us go down the path of some different communities with these.
I agree with you that, being on council for, I'll say it right now, a very long time.
Yes.
That there was a couple of years where it was like, lots of proclamations about like, what's going on here?
Right.
So I appreciate, but I think that they're important
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I think.
All right, so we have our consent agenda. Any questions on the minutes? Good job. And then we'll have a quasi-judicial hearing tonight about an ordinance adopting an expansion of our urban growth boundary. Under new business, a scope of review for the March 16th appeal on Bailey Meadows subdivision. We'll review an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Lake Oswego for the after-hours police record services that we're talking to them about, and planning commission term adjustment. After that, we'll do our council and committee reports, and then we'll adjourn, and then we will convene for another executive session after our meeting concludes. With that, welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
We will go ahead and talk about this RFP.
Yes,
Or-
good evening. Yes, requests for proposals are out. I know some people were getting worried about the RFP going out, but it is out. The bids are due back by March 25th. I already had 2 phone calls this morning from people who are looking to bid with questions. So tonight I am not coming before you with proposed numbers or what the different situations would cost, but I just would like us to go into the process realizing that we could have choices to make in front of us about what we want the transit department to look like in the future. And so I did lay out when the bids are due, when I think I'll come before you, hopefully April 6th. I will come before you with presentation of the bids so that you'll get an idea of where they're coming in, whether the cost is really high, whether it's relatively low, etc. And we will likely at that time give a notice of intent to award based on those bid proposals. We then, of course, will have some conversations and contract negotiations, and it may be necessary to come back before you and give a presentation at that time with a recommendation of how we move forward. And then it is in the RFP that they are aware that they would take over the contract by May 25th. And we have until, I think it's not quite mid-June that we need to have that contract handed over and not have them be temporary employees anymore, because we are on a 6-month with having temporary employees. Feel free to stop me and ask questions, by the way.
So are there issues at all with, now there is employees versus when they were contractors at all?
I will say from my perspective so far, that in a very short time period, we've been able to turn the ship in the right direction.
You're
As you
spending
know.
more time as a supervisor instead of as a manager?
I'm sorry?
So are you spending more time, more time as a supervisor versus?
I would say currently Muna, the transit program administrator, is spending more time. She's, doing the scheduling, which is fairly time consuming because it changes. Even if you think you have the schedule in place, someone gets sick or someone needs time off, then you know how it goes. And so then, it's a new schedule the next week.
Does the contract say that we can choose not to accept any if we
Yes.
want to deal with the employees directly and?
It does.
Are we going to look at some cost provisions to compare?
Yes, and I will cover that in large detail in a minute.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. As you know, we were, Carl, having trouble, with the mom and pop contractor situation, just retaining drivers, and, we were facing, not only we were running on a shoestring, but I knew several were leaving, due to management issues. And the crew that we currently have in place are all, we've been able to hire and retrain 5 new drivers since we took over, so we are fully staffed, and they are of very high quality employees. We managed to steal 3 from TriMet, so yeah. So it's actually no, that's a pretty high bar. So yeah, and the atmosphere is a lot better than what we had before. They're all working really hard and trying to really show them what a good job they can do. And as you know, our drivers have always been a pretty high quality bunch to begin with. We do have some drivers that have been with us for a very long time. 2003, as a matter of fact, is our longest, and I believe 2006 after that. So there is some provisions in the RFP as well that the bidder will try to retain the current staff, which is fairly common. A lot of times they wanna bring in their own operations manager, but they retain the current staff. So there is information in the RFP, and I do say how much they are currently making and what their package.
Major labor shortage right now. I'm pretty sure they big staff to get the drivers.
That's, yes, yeah. More than anything, what I want them to do is not only keep them, but keep them whole.
Yep.
Yeah.
You compete with the drivers from the school district in between, cause I know they have a
Heavily.
big shortage as well.
Heavily, yeah. That's been, school drivers, and then in today's economy, the trucking industry has really come to be competitive with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a
CDLs,
CDL, Amazon, for example, in Troutdale is hiring. If you have a CDL, you get benefits day 1.
And those packages don't talk back.
That's right,
Oh.
that's exactly right.
That's exactly
So,
right. My
it
dad
is
says that
difficult.
all the time.
Yeah.
Just playing with kids.
Yeah.
So, well, this is true. I mean, public transit is better than kids to a lot of our drivers that come over from the student transportation. So what I did tonight, and what I just wanna kinda lay out is, the first little chart you see here is how we used to, historically be our organization chart. And I'm not great with these little flow things and arrows, so bear with me. And there's a little wiggle room here and there, but basically, the way it has always kind of happened is we had Sam and we had Mountain Express, and both of us oversaw a contractor. After taking over, both Mountain Express contract for the county and then terminating your contractor, you find out really well some of the glitches and things that were happening behind the scenes that weren't so great, such as the contractor was getting direction from me and from the county, and we weren't necessarily, the county county and I weren't necessarily, I mean, we were saying we have to meet and our buses have to be timed, but we weren't asking, is this a problem for your staff? Is this going to create, personally, I assumed my contractor was going to tell me that if there was a problem. So I would tell the contractor, here's my new added hours of service, and the county would do the same thing. And then she in the background would just kind of work her magic and make it happen. And there could have been a lot more collaboration, I think, that could have saved some headaches.
At the same time, though, it was not a headache for you then because you didn't know about it, and today it could
Right.
be a headache.
Right. Well, so what ended up happening behind the scenes, it wasn't a headache for me, but the schedules weren't as efficient as they could have been. And so you might have people working really extreme split shifts, and you lose drivers when you do that, right? You have them come in for a couple hours and then go home, they're off the clock for a couple hours, and then they come back for a couple hours, and then they're off the clock. So not being the person in control of the scheduling, you don't see a lot of those inefficiencies that were happening and causing part of the heartburn with the drivers. So since we took over, we have really tried to streamline the schedules and be respectful of drivers' times and how we can better align everything behind the scenes. So one of the other things that I just have to mention, and I'm sure that all of you are aware of this, but when you hire a contractor, then as you see the fleet supervisor, who's a mechanic, dispatch personnel, that's kind of a supervisory position, they also drive, and drivers, and then there's bus washers. Those are not our employees, and so you really have no control over who they're hiring, what they're doing with their time. You have control over your contract, obviously, but you really, although it's your service, have pretty little guidance in their employees, because they're not your employees, and you get in big trouble if you try to start supervising an employee that's not yours under a contract. And so that had become kind of an issue with the contractor. Do you want to jump in?
No, I don't necessarily always know that we have, under the current employment arrangement, that we always have the most control over our own employees.
I crack the whip. So if I walk back to the dispatch office and somebody's watching Judge Judy on the computer, I can say, hey, I'm paying you right now, and that's not what I'm paying you for. Whereas before, you have to go to the supervisor, and then you have to, well, you know, they have some downtime. Okay, well, not on the company computer, and so then you've got them on a phone. I mean, so anyway.
But but I'm sorry, I don't mean to rebut it, but
No,
I mean,
no, it's fine.
But it is very different to let go, fight with your contract person and say, we've got a problem that you need to fix and make them deal with it, versus us have a problem with a public employee and have to get rid of it. It's a different process.
Well, public employees are at will though, and so it's easier than some of the contracts.
I will say that.
That's because your department head.
That while I see what you're saying, you have no control over that employee though. I cannot go to them and say, this person is, I have some leeway to say this person is not an asset and back it up, but it's really hard to get a company you've contracted with to fire their employees. Or, I mean, you can't manage their employees.
Right.
Legally, you cannot. So, okay, so then we switched. Here's our current structure. As you know, we do contract with the county, and so we are currently the county's contractor. So the interesting twist to what happened, sorry, if they're out of order, this is the Sandy Transit current structure.
How we are now operating on our own.
Yes. The interesting twist is that because of the way things happened, we were contracted by the county to oversee their contract, and then again, we've terminated our contractor. So we are actually the contractor for the county at the moment. what I'm asking you guys to kind of visualize going forward is, currently, we're acting as their contractor. They are, also helping us in various ways, so it's not all on us. But, the day-to-day has been mainly on SAM employees. So currently, the way we're structured and set up, the county is paying us based on their actual cost. So we are tracking hours and making sure that we're kept whole, and they're reimbursing us, but basically, we are paying their invoices and then getting reimbursed. We are keeping track of their driver's hours and then getting reimbursed. What I'd like to put in our brains right now is that going forward, we would have the ability to restructure as their contractor and have them pay us based on a cost per hour rate, similarly to the way they did with Roseland. Yes?
Are they paying us in any way for our administrative services, some kind of a percentage? Or is
Not
that something
currently.
we could work out?
So, as you know, they do pay us for the positions that were already existing. So the employee, support, they are still paying, they still pay rent. But primarily, we're operating on, keeping Sam whole and a reimbursement of their cost. So no, we aren't really reaping back some of those administrative costs that is happening.
Are we precluded from doing
Nope,
that?
nope, we're not. We're not, and they are, more than willing to go any direction that we want them to go. So, that's kind of why I wanted to get this in front of us tonight, because I think that we have a couple of options going forward. I think we can go back to the way it was, where and that is how the RFP is structured. That, the contractor would come in and they would contract on behalf of SAM and they would contract on behalf of Mountain Express. I'm
Is it more
gonna-
efficient to go with, one contractor doing both of them, or is it?
It is more
to split
efficient. It is more efficient,
Efficient to
and,
do both the same.
and we should, and the RFP clearly spells out that we want them to show all of the efficiencies that we are gaining by going with one contractor. It is very efficient to have the two services operating as one. With one pool of drivers, we can switch drivers around when we need to, put them on different routes. If I'm short one day and they are, or whatever, we can move them around. They all have CDLs, they're all trained on all the routes. We buy supplies in bulk, and we pay based on a percentage. There's a lot of efficiencies. One thing that I did notice, and I'm gonna switch to the hybrid and then kinda come back. One thing that I did notice, in having a contractor, and now that I'm essentially overseeing two services, operating two services, because the county still does have oversight, so I don't wanna use the word oversee, but we're operating two services. Is that the way the contract is set up, you have your contractor paying for accidents or incidents that are the driver's fault. So they either have to pay the deductible or the cost of the repair of the vehicle if, for instance, the driver whacks the bus up, against a post parking it, because the driver with the CDL shouldn't do that. That's a preventable accident. Therefore, there is somewhat of an incentive for your contractor to maybe not tell you every time that happens. And when you're operating two services now that have both grown, it's really difficult for Sandy admin staff to always be out overseeing vehicles, making sure that they aren't dinged and that they're in great shape. We do have a great maintenance program, so I'm not talking about lube oil and filters. We have oversight. So one thing that we could do to have kind of a hybrid of an in-house contractor is to pull the fleet mechanic in-house. doing that, there already is a fleet mechanic that has been under the contractor. You could pull it in-house and have them be oversight of your vehicles. So that person would be telling your contractor what vehicle goes out, what vehicle is able to be used, what vehicle cannot go out because it's not safe, or it needs to be maintenanced. They cannot oversee, obviously, the employees, but they would oversee your equipment. And then there could be savings there. The county obviously has agreed anytime that person works on their vehicles, they would be billed. So you would reimburse the cost of that employee to a certain degree.
Employee,
One employee.
What was when that employee's sick? Or just had to leave one day?
Leave's easier than sick, probably.
Well, except for the fact that we run 7 days a week.
They
I
would-
just know this from work, I'm trying to
Right.
get 2 people doing the job, so I have redundancy purposes.
How often do you have maintenance, you have maintenance daily?
Yeah, so,
Well, I would
yeah,
think so.
this, I mean, it's
Yeah.
probably more than a full-time job, to
Yeah.
be perfectly
Yeah.
honest. This person, does very light maintenance though. I mean, they don't even do lube, oil, and filters, but they do the inspections that have to be done.
Safety checks.
Fuses, lights, bulbs. They actually end up, and I can attest to this at the moment because that person is our operations manager currently, and so a lot of our maintenance that they used to do is being done by a vendor, and that person saves us a lot of money. A lot of money. Very recent example is one of our buses coming onto 26 died on the ramp, and we had to call the mechanic to it instead of sending, we'd normally just send the mechanic. And I am not kidding, the invoice said, I jiggle tested such and such cable, it was loose, tightened it, bus runs fine, $600.
That job.
That's right.
Yeah, so anyway, so that is an option that I think that we should think about. Again, I will bring this to you later, but one option that's a hybrid of in-house, out-of-house is to pull that person in as kind of a fleet oversight of our equipment. And other departments could use them if needed.
I was gonna ask that, can the mechanic with the next
Absolutely.
department or
So-
fleet that we have in
So we already, we perform the rides for the senior center, for example, that aren't in city limits, but are in their jurisdiction, that are going to doctor's appointments. We do that, and then we invoice the senior center for our gas and insurance. And, Roadjoy used to invoice for their hours, which is us now. So it would be the same thing, you just have that person log that they, did an inspection or did light maintenance for the senior center's vehicle, took an hour, and you invoice the senior center. We do the same thing, like the bus washes the senior center's vehicles for them. Back to, in my 7 minutes I have left, back to our current structure. One thing that I wanna say, and that I hope to bring you later, but I'm not gonna bring it tonight, because until we have numbers, there's no reason to even talk about it. There is a possibility that what we could decide based on what bids come in. So, for example, another county agency that had operating costs that were similar to ours, they were $48 an hour. Their bids just came in at $69 an hour and $75 an hour, and they chose the $75 an hour contractor. If our bids were to come in that high, I will ask our finance department to also run numbers of what maintaining the service in-house looks like. And I would talk to the county about what they are willing to pay us per service hour to offset our contracted costs. And what I hope you guys think about is that with STIF funding, the county right now is starting a lot of different shuttles. They've expanded Mount Hood Express, and they have openly said that the way, they do not want to run a transit agency. They hope to look to current and existing operators and say, can you run this shuttle on our behalf, and contract with them. do have the opportunity, and we don't have to do it right now, we can do it later, to keep things in-house and become a pool of employees for Clackamas County that other agencies like the county look to, or even the senior centers, Hoodland Senior Center, our own senior center that have part-time drivers, could look to us as an option of contracted employees that would help offset keeping employees in-house. I'm not gonna ask you to look at that until we have actual numbers, but I just want you to know that we do have an opportunity to be more of a regional player and more of just the city that operates its own transit service, and provide what I see as a real problem for most agencies out there, is having a really good substantial pool of employees. I'm sorry, I have a cold, so it sounds like I'm starting to lose my voice.
Let me help you out here, so you cough a little bit. We've been talking about expanding, things like going to Clackamas.
Mm-hmm.
The counties talked about, doing some stuff countywide. My guess is that there'll be some opportunities to increase. Do you think that, which direction would be the easiest to be flexible, go up in terms of numbers, if we do get a lot of increases, pressure to grow? Employees would be the best, or you think contractor would be the better?
You know, it's been my experience, I mean, it depends on the contractor you choose. Obviously, my experience in the past couple of years, the contractor really struggled to keep, drivers and to keep quality drivers. And I think part of that is because that is where they make their profit, to be perfectly blunt. So most corporations, make their profit off of paying the drivers. Not a great package, right? It's not a very big, margin of profit anyway already in that industry. So you don't really have control over how they recruit, how they retain.
So on that, and so I'm gonna keep a very open mind, right? And you know me, I love regional significance and all that. I hear that. I just want you to know, like, where my questions will be, right, when you come back in.
Yep.
And, you know, to the point that you just made, a lot of operators, because margins are so tight, they can only offer so much in benefits and fringe benefits and retirement programs and everything else, a lot of which we're required to offer our public employees. And so, more than just like the short term, what it's gonna cost us, you know, this year, next year, 3 years. I mean, I remember you, Counselor Exner, in our last meeting when we had the financial audit in here wanting to know about our long-term PERS liability obligation, right? I'm gonna wanna know,
Absolutely.
right, how the long-term impacts to our budget and what we're really getting into as far as long-term benefits and costs and all that. Now, open mind, right, and I might be really educated on all that, and then it's like, yeah, all right, going for the regional significance, right? But I'm gonna have to, me personally, I'm gonna have to be really rest assured on some of those issues.
I agree, actually, and, I don't think unless I can show that we can keep costs similar, or maybe even bring our costs down by contracting to others, I probably won't make that.
I respect that and say yes, I agree with that. I was gonna ask at the beginning of this, as you started, is can we respond to our own RFP? And I think you basically kind of said that at the very end, it was if it was coming back. I would like to know, with what Stan just said, with that piece on there, what would it cost regardless if what they're coming back with, right? Because
Yeah.
in some cases, when you're going out, and we've seen this, I know in my business and others, you only have one person bidding on it. They can bid whatever they want, and they feel, or two people.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like our sewer treatment plant. You know, it's like, you take this one or you take this one, because, you know, and so we're looking at, do we do it in-house again? Because they can really charge whatever they want and elevate your cost, that we could maybe be providing a better service at a cheaper price, and being more positive with even the employees too.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know if any of the other people working with the county are able to get some kind of a fee from the county, and if we can build something in to get some kind of a management fee.
Yeah. Definitely look at that with the county,
thank you for the update, and we have trust in you, Andy. We know that whenever you come back.
Well, we were already looking at.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah.
There's one spot out there that had the Pioneer Woman
I
Parade.
looked on the agenda.
Those are places where it was really easy to identify because the trees kind of
Okay.
located in one. When you get down here on the
We're
flat,
good.
Hey.
people were scattering to go everywhere and track down property.
Comes to the territory.
Like there was no efforts.
I mean, you're
I don't remember where. Those over here.
Your bill's probably gonna be clear.
Yeah, I know. Council's not like really batting an eye.
I'm not sure what happened.
We're up there like
Bar-
100 grand on this.
What's the name of that?
Well,
Ranch down there by the
it's, you know, I actually
211,
still went when we,
12,
I feel like the
I forget the name of the ranch
when we
there.
lost it.
Right.
Yeah, it gets a little colder.
Yeah.
Bartle Trail from here to there.
We have a Bartle
I just feel
Trail
bad because I know there's things that
up to
you asked me to look at.
We're making jokes.
And can somebody please explain to me how it's March?
So,
Council, are we all kind of ready?
The museum, there's something got a really.
Long
good
after
picture.
you read it out, you can sign it. Yeah, I'll just, what I'll say is that they can just, if they wanna, hear from the applicant and then one of the appellants. If they're here. Where is it? I guess I'll just click the link. That'll work. Yeah. Everyone, ready?
Go.
All right. We'll call this meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jeff, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Pietzel?
Here.
Counselor Smallwood?
Here.
Counselor Hamblin?
Excused?
Counselor Lee?
Here.
Counselor Exner?
Here.
Counselor Schultz?
Here.
Mayor Pulliam?
Here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to our meeting this evening. I always start with a quick review of what we'll be going through the agenda tonight. Our first item will be changes to the agenda. That usually moves pretty quick. We'll then go to public comment. Now, I see a lot of individuals in the room. I'm sure you all have a certain issue. If you do wish to testify, you want to testify about. If you're here for the quasi-judicial hearing for the UGB expansion, you'll want to testify at that time during that hearing. Other than that, all public comment is done after we do the changes to the agenda during the public comment time. I'll kind of reiterate that when it becomes time. After that, we'll do a proclamation for the League of Women Voters Month. We'll have our consent agenda. Under ordinances, we have that quasi-judicial hearing on the urban renewal boundary expansion. Under new business, we have a memo on the scope of review for the March 16th appeal of the Bailey Meadows subdivision. Then we'll review an intergovernmental agreement with Lake Oswego for after-hours police record services, and then a planning commission term adjustment conversation. From there, we'll do our report from the city manager, our committee and council reports, and then we'll adjourn, and then a reminder to council that we have an executive session afterwards. With that, is there any changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. It is now time for public comment. So this is for public comment on any issues not on the agenda during the quasi-judicial hearing for later tonight. All right, hi Kathleen. Please remember to state your name, address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road. I would just like, because it is kind of a confusing situation that we found ourselves in, with regards to the agenda item number 10 and agenda item 11.1, I just want, if I could ask the city council or staff or somebody to kind of clarify, we don't want to step on any toes with regards to the future appeal. Obviously, the UGB expansion has something to do with that. So giving us all direction on how we can avoid violating any kind of ex parte contact, or, you know, we've always heard you're not supposed to mention anything about it. So people were asking me about it, and I don't have that answer. So some good advice to us about how we support number 10.1 without messing ourselves over on 11.1.
Understand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. David, can you assist?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. So what I would suggest first is with respect, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on, but 10.1 is the scope
It's
of...
the scope of, no, 10.1 is the ordinance on the urban growth boundary expansion.
Okay.
And then 11.1 is the scope of review.
Okay, great, thank you. So with respect to 10.1, I would ask folks as best they can to, if they have testimony, to relate it to that application and the UGB expansion. I think it's almost inevitable, given, as Ms. Walker mentioned, that there is some crossover between that and the subdivision application. You know, that there's going to be maybe some discussion, some crossover discussion. That's okay, but it would be nice to be able to stick to the, you know, the relevant criteria for the UGB expansion itself, particularly knowing that there will be an appeal on the subdivision that's coming up later this month. It's in a public hearing setting, so to the extent that there's a lot of that discussion, normally that would be something that technically is an ex parte contact because it's happening, topics about the subdivision are happening outside of that hearing. But we'll have the minutes for tonight's proceedings, and we can include that in the record if there's a real concern. So I don't want people to get too high-centered on that, but if I could just maybe impress upon folks that when it comes time to do the UGB hearing, that we all do the best we can to stick to the subjects that are germane to the UGB hearing. With respect to the item 11, I would just put a slight twist, and I didn't get a chance to talk to the mayor before tonight, so that's on me, that we do entertain just testimony. I know the applicant submitted something that you have in front of you, and I would also invite the folks. I think Ms. Walker was one. Aaron, last name is escaping me, but the folks that appealed the subdivision decision are welcome to provide some testimony on that.
So is that a full hearing then?
It's not. That's, I'm going to get into that. All we're talking about is just the scope of how you're going to conduct that hearing on the 16th.
But we never open up for public comment on individual issues on the agenda. So if people want to speak to that, wouldn't they use the public comment portion of the meeting to do that?
I would just invite them to come up at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with it.
It's cleaner, I think, and you're right. I think mostly because I want to be sure that if the applicant has submitted some testimony, I understand why. I want to be sure that others, particularly those that have appealed, would also get to weigh in on the scope of review. But it's not a discussion on the merits of the appeal. That'll happen on the 16th. It's just about how the council is going to conduct that appeal.
So if I don't know if that's, I'll try to do a quick review for everybody on that. Yeah. So if you have a public testimony that you'd like to provide that has absolutely nothing to do with Bailey Meadows, please feel free to do so at this time. If you wish to give public testimony during the urban boundary expansion portion of the Bailey Meadows discussion, that would be the time to give that. And then if you would like to provide comment on how fully we do a review during the appeal process, it would then be under new business 11.1, and then I will take testimony at that time on that issue. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll try, and then I'm here all night, so I can help answer questions as they arise, and get help from David. Okay, so I'm seeing no public comment at this time. Okay, so then we go to proclamations. All right, so we have a proclamation this evening for the League of Women Voters Month here in March 2020. Whereas the League of Women Voters of Clackamas County has since its 1955 founding made significant contributions to the good local government through its nonpartisan community service activities and voter information programs. And whereas the year 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the League in our nation and in the state of Oregon, and whereas the City Council of the City of Sandy appreciates and commends the League membership for outstanding public service in our community and urges broad public support of the League of Women Voters and its programs and objectives. Now, therefore, I, Stan Pulliam, Mayor of the City of Sandy, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as League of Women Voters Month in the City of Sandy, and call upon the people of Sandy to recognize and participate in the special observance. So, there that is. Thank you. Consent agenda. Looking for a motion.
I'll move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Schultz, a second by Counselor Lee, that we adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now under ordinances, 10.1. So I am going to call this public hearing quasi-judicial order of conduct to order. So there's a time limit, 15 minutes for applicant's presentation, 5 minutes for each proponent or opponent, 5 minutes for applicant's rebuttal, 5 minutes for questions from the audience. So I'm opening this public hearing for ordinance 2020-03, and I'm calling for any abstentions from the hearing body.
None.
Any conflicts of interest? Okay. I gotta do a poll of the hearing body for ex parte contact on this issue. Nope. Challenges for any individuals of this hearing body? Okay. Just on ex parte with David there, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of conversation and stuff on social media and different mediums that I think probably the majority of council members have come across at some point. So obviously not having any in-depth conversations with any of the participants, either pro or con on this project, but there has, obviously me speaking for myself, there has been at least commentary going on through different social media. All right, challenges to individual members? All right, I must read the following statements. If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include your proposed modifications that you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by the close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff report.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
So, before I go into the little slideshow that I have prepared, I just wanted to run through a few facts. What you have before you is a staff report that's basically an update to the staff report that Planning Commission received. Planning Commission's recommendation was 6-0, so all 6 members that participated voted to recommend approval before you tonight. As you'll also see in the staff report, there's other supplemental documents from the applicant, and then also testimony written that was submitted, and then verbal at the February 11th Planning Commission hearing. In addition to that, staff finds and then Planning Commission agreed that it meets all of the applicable state goals and criterion, all of the ordinances, all the OARs that are applicable. The applicant did some analysis as well. And because the land that's being brought in would be for public facilities such as roads, stormwater ponds, and parks, there's no need for analysis or deep dive into analysis for housing, commercial, and industrial developments. So that should all be reflected in the staff report. And then before you tonight is also an ordinance that we get to at the end once we move past the hearing. So this is UGB expansion file 20-00 UGB. You want to go to the next slide. This shows the approximate location. The red area is the property that you'll be talking about just for the proceedings proceedings of the hearing on the 16th on the next item. This area is just south of that. It shows up here on this one. It's the shaded area just below where the red area was on the previous slide. So it's right along Highway 211. There'll be some additional slides in a few slides here that kind of show that area in greater detail. Next slide, please. So these are the hearing dates. The one on February 11th that I mentioned, there's the one tonight, and then there's one before the Clackamas County Planning Commission next Monday night that I will be attending on city staff's behalf, and then also on March 18th in front of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. Next slide. So this kind of shows the area a little bit better in detail. It's 6.42 acres. Just going 1 through 7, one on here, which is in the upper right-hand corner, is the parkland. It's kind of like a pie shape or a triangular shape. Number 2 is a slope easement and temporary construction easement, which is like a sliver of area along the park. Number 3 is public right-of-way dedication, which is Gunderson Road, which is just kind of south of 1, 2, and 4. 4 is a public utility easement. 5 is a stormwater tract for all the road facilities that would be constructed with this project. 6 is the permanent slope easement and construction easement for the expansion of Highway 211. And then 7 is the portion of Highway 211 that will be brought into the UGB if the proposal is passed or adopted. Next slide. This area shows just a little bit of detail on what the storm pond is, and then this was one change that was made. If you look through the packet of information, originally this area in the red bubble was not actually included in the original recommended area to be brought within the UGB. It was included kind of at the last moment before the Planning Commission for their consideration, because we want to make sure we take in all of the Highway 211 area that would need improvements. So that's why this area was added right before the Planning Commission hearing, and that's part of the 6.42 acres and identified on the previous slide. So I did get a question from one of the council members. Thank you, Ms. Lee. The existing county zoning is exclusive farm use, so EFU. Once the property is brought into the UGB, or if the property is brought into the UGB, I should say, the zoning would remain EFU. So it still remains with the county zoning designation. It's just eligible for annexation once it comes into our UGB. If then the annexation was to occur, the new zoning would be parks and open space for number 1 on a couple slides ago for the parkland. And most likely the remainder of the area would be zoned single-family residential. However, there would be a condition most likely with the annexation that the land could only be used for those uses that I've identified, not for housing or employment needs or industrial needs. So even though it'd be zoned single-family residential, it would have a restriction and no ability to actually be used for residential purposes, other than a road right away.
Just one quick comment on that too, because that's been an issue. I know that Clackamas County asked about, maybe others have the same thought. If the city had a zone that was, in some jurisdictions do, many don't, that would just be for public facilities, that would be what we would put on this. But the reality is there's not one, except for the parks and open space, that just sort of encompasses a road or, a sewer, if there were a sewer line, infrastructure. So that's why Kelly refers to it being SFR, which is most consistent with your plan and what you'd expect there, but there will be a condition that only allows the road.
How strong is that condition? I mean, the world changes. Let's say we do this, the road doesn't happen, and it's, we're 20 years, 25 years down, and we got vacant land and a new council. How hard is it to come back and change it to single-family residential that allows homes?
Well, somebody would have to go through basically a process to show why why a need for single-family residential would be present in order to remove the condition.
And it'd be a council decision to remove the condition, or maybe at a staff level, or what?
No. It would be in this case, ultimately, the way your code is written now, it would be a council decision.
Okay, thank you.
And so Ms. Lee asked the question, and it's a very good question, of basically how can you take exclusive farm use land, because it is kind of priority 1 land for agricultural use within the state of Oregon. And basically, it's for two reasons. It's because it's in our urban reserve area, which is our URA line, which if you look at our big maps, it's usually like a highlighted green line as on that map. So you got the pink line, which is the UGB, and the green line is the URA line. So it's within inside of that urban reserve area. And then the second reason why you could rezone it from EFU is because it's what we've explained as an urban facility that's needed, and that's the roads, the stormwater trap, and the pond, or in the parkland. So that's what allows you to rezone it from EFU to another urban zoning designation. Next slide. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but basically the two ways of doing the parkland, which you'll find out, are dedicating parkland or taking a fee in lieu, which you're all well aware of. Instead of taking the fee in lieu in this case, this parkland that would be brought into the UGB as part of this proposal would be basically supplementing or replacing that fee in lieu fee that we would typically collect. Next slide. I just want to again point out, I highlighted it with yellow, but for some reason it did not display it there. Just want to highlight again that number 1 in your upper right-hand corner is the parkland mentioned on the previous slide. Next slide. So the Gunderson Road extension, again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I do want to just mention a few things here. So Melissa Avenue, which is where the subdivision to the north of this UGB expansion, so the subdivision to the north of this UGB expansion would be using Melissa Avenue to give it a second egress, ingress, and to also distribute those trips a little bit better. Gunderson Road is part of why this UGB extension is coming in. That's kind of the main impetus for the whole project, actually. The city's transportation system plan anticipates the extension of Gunderson Road to Highway 211 near the boundary. And if built, it would provide a second means of access to the subdivision to the north and to future development, not just the subdivision you'll be hearing on the 16th. It would also provide opportunities for vehicular connectivity through that whole area. And then the specific details of the second access intersecting with Highway 211, as you also know, are being worked out with the city, the Department of ODOT, and the applicant. Next slide. So as you'll see on this slide, you'll see Highway 211. The project site that's referred to on there is the subdivision that is being appealed and heard on the 16th. The property to the just south of that, where there's some trees and some fields, is part of the property that the UGB expansion would be on. The blue line, which is really the important line on this slide, is where our TSP currently identifies Gunderson Road intersecting with Highway 211. However, after more analysis, it's been determined that that is just not a possibility due to site distance, the super curve there on the highway. And as you guys all live in town, so you know that when you're driving south or north on Highway 211, to put another main road intersecting right there would be very problematic. So, next slide. So this location on Gunderson Road is what's actually being proposed with the UGB expansion. This location is to the southwest of where that blue line was on the previous slide. And this proposed location for the intersection actually meets site distance and other engineering factors that were analyzed. So if the UGB is expanded, the applicant would construct, currently how it's written, the extension would need to be complete no later than the city issues the 30th certificate of occupancy to the north. Like I said, that's just currently how it's written. That obviously could still change. If the UGB expansion does not occur, a proposed condition of approval would require the property owner that's conducting Bailey Meadows, which you'll find out more on the 16th, would instead actually dedicate right away through an easement. Because if the UGB expansion is not successful, then we cannot, there's no way of actually putting in the road because it is an urban facility. So we need the UGB to occur if Gunderson Road has any potential. And also if the UGB expansion does not occur, we can't even accept a dedication for the right of way of Gunderson. It would only be able to be done through an easement process. And I'm sure David could go into further details on that if needed. So, and that pretty much summarizes what I have prepared. If you have any questions.
Questions? Counselor?
Yes, in the discussion, it referred to the old Barlow Road Is that protected in some way in this expansion? And how has this city treated Old Barlow Road and other locations?
Well, so the county looks at those historic resources in closer detail than we do. I think my understanding is that Gunderson Road would probably go right across where the Barlow Trail used to run. There's a lot of roads within the city of Sandy and housing developments that go right across where the Barlow Road was. So Tupper Road, just right out our doors here, is basically my understanding where the Barlow Road was. And then as it kind of winds up the hill, it goes through Longview Estates, which is actually a small subdivision I used to live in, and it goes right through someone's house. And then as it continues south of that, it actually goes through, I believe it's called Barlow Ridge subdivision. And so, again, it cuts through lots and houses. So there's already a lot of circumstances or instances where the Barlow Trail, what we believe to be the original trail alignment, actually goes through a lot of roads and, you know, utility lines cross it and houses are where it is. So I don't think there's any desire to disturb the trail in any way, but I think the road would cross the trail in its proposed location. That's my understanding.
Maybe just to elaborate on that a little bit, so the city's plan, the city doesn't have anything in its plan or in its ordinances that speaks to, you know, if you're gonna cross the trail, you must do X or Y. It refers to the fact that the county has listed it in its plan as a historic resource, and as best we could tell, there's nothing in the county's plan that also specifically says you have to do X or Y if you're crossing the trail. So it seems to be something more that's inventoried and, you know, is there obviously as a pretty important historical artifact, but there's nothing that we could find that in the county's regulations that regulates, you know, how the road would or wouldn't be built.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we're open for 15 minutes for the applicant's presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Pulliam. I'll be a lot briefer than 15 minutes.
Well, I'm timing you.
Okay, that sounds fair. My name is Chris Goodell. I'm with AKS Engineering, and my back is fine, but the microphone is really low, so I'm going to bend over and speak into it so everybody can hear. My address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. Working here for the applicant. So Kelly has we have a slideshow. I'd say it's fairly redundant of what Mr. O'Neill just presented, but I'll go ahead and go through it and maybe at the end share a few pieces of information that weren't really part of the staff report. So it's just a slide listing the applicant's team here. We have our firm, AKS, that did a number of, we did civil engineering, land surveying, planning, and Lancaster Mobley did the traffic engineering, and Schwabe is the applicant's legal counsel. So I don't know, give the clicker, or should I just should I just say next slide?
Just feel free to let me know.
Okay, so it's you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. So this again shows the location of the property. It also shows the adjacent Nicholas Glen neighborhood at the top of the map, and then in between the area that we're discussing here tonight and the Nicholas Glen neighborhood is the subdivision, which you'll hear an appeal on in a couple weeks. Next slide, please. So this map shows, this is from the city's transportation system plan. It shows the arrows there are pointing to where Gunderson Road is planned to be, and then it also shows in the green line that Kelly had referred to a while ago, which is the urban reserve area. Next slide, please. So this slide here shows the area again just in a black and white form. If you look at the next one, it breaks down the areas. The other next slide, which Kelly described earlier there too. I won't repeat it because it's not all that interesting. But that map there shows the different areas and the purposes of each area and why they would be brought into the urban growth boundary. Next slide, please. So I guess just a little bit of information is, so we've been working on this project for quite some time. we had met with city staff a long time ago in a pre-application conference and knew that bringing Gunderson Road was a priority for the city. We met with county staff in an attempt to put the road outside the urban growth boundary. It's called a goal exception, and county staff wasn't amenable to that, and so we kind of closed the book at that time on the possibility of bringing Gunderson Road through. And then we had we had a neighborhood meeting. We met with neighbors that are probably here behind me tonight, and then and a bunch more. And we heard from them also that it was of the neighborhood's interest. They really wanted another way in and out of the Bailey Meadows subdivision. So we met with city staff again and brainstormed, try to think of different ways to make that happen for the neighborhood. And that's, I think maybe Mr. Doofman and Mike Robinson that had the idea of amending the UGB to bring the road through inside the UGB instead of outside. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. Other than the idea was if you put the slide back one, so area 1 there, which is the triangle piece. We also understood that the neighbors wanted a park, and so this was an idea that otherwise it was going to be land that wasn't, it was going to be sort of an island separated from the city. So that little island would be outside the UGB. So our client decided that would be a good idea. It was sort of a win-win opportunity to put a park site there. So that was the genesis of that idea. So we're hoping that you approve the application here tonight. I'm here with members of the engineering design team. If you have any questions about the roadway or anything that might be relevant to this application, then please don't hesitate to ask before you close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions? Good right now? Okay. All right, I'm going to call for proponent testimony. 5 minutes. No proponent testimony? Okay. Proponent, a 4. Remember, I'm going to need your name, mailing
it's
address.
Erin Finley, 37616 Rachel Drive here in Sandy. And I'm speaking in favor of the UGB. This feels repetitive because we did this with the Planning Commission. But I will bring up that I am a resident of Nicholas Glen, and safety is our top priority. And while I won't speak for every neighbor, I'll speak for myself. Having one and only resident controlled access in and out of our neighborhood, and then the addition of 100 more residents is a scary thought. I never thought I'd be in favor of UGB expansions. I think it's beautiful driving from Gresham here to Sandy and seeing that nice gap and land, and I come from somewhere where you would never see that. But with that said, safety still has to be top priority for residents that are here now and future residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Remember, state your name and address for the record.
37828 Rachel Drive. My name is Makoto Lane. I'm in favor of, yes, this UGB expansion, but I propose that this isn't the only place in the city where we might need another UGB expansion. I don't think the city has done a review of its general plan or the UGB and how it relates to UGB. See, it's come to light because the developer is using some of the loopholes in the city planning code and the unfinished UGB lines to extort the city. And that's the only reason we're here tonight talking about this, is that the developers, using these loopholes and unfinished UGB to extort us. And so that's why it's on the agenda. That's why we're talking about it this evening. It's not true that the developer even tried or applied for an exception to the UGB with the county, and in fact refused, again resorting to pointing to the loopholes that they could use to extort the city through lawsuits or threats of lawsuits. And I'm not sure how much they threatened to sue the city for. Maybe David, the city attorney, could be of assistance with that number. But so, in conclusion, I support this, but I also support the city possibly coming at this issue conservatively and kind of seeing where else we might need UGB expansions, unless we want to do this over and over again. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, appreciate it. Looking for more proponent testimony, please. Remember to state your name and address. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Gigi Duncan, 18275 Rachel Drive. I'm also a citizen of Nicholas Glen, and you know, again, safety is our #1 thing. We've heard from staff multiple times that we are well beyond what's considered the safe levels of traffic. What you need to know about our neighborhood is that we have 3-bedroom homes, and it's affordable family housing, and it's all families, and it's all little kids playing on the street. We were built without a park, which we think was something we really wish we could go back and fix. But because we don't have one, our kids all play on the street, and we have a lot of kids, and so we're just asking the city to look out for us. I guess we can't talk about that, but I am here to say I think the urban growth boundary expansion is a really great thing, and I think it's a great opportunity for the city because, yes, we need housing, and we need this subdivision or one like it, and we need more even than that. But what I'm trying to think of is all our little, everything around between Highway 211 and town is built out, right? We're running all of our subdivisions directly onto Little DeBarco Road, which is a 25-mile-an-hour road. And you guys know this, it was built like this with a bunch of crosswalks on it because that's where our citizens have to walk out of our neighborhoods to go down and play in the Tickle Creek Trail, which is where our area is. It's where our kids and our dogs and our pets, and that's where we go. So I think we probably know that is already an area that has way too many cars. We also know that there will be more construction that's going to come down on DeBarco, and DeBarco is that only road that goes between 362nd and Highway 211. So what we're doing is everybody in our neighborhood, our 1,000 trips a day, are all coming down our one little street. It's a steep little street, and it stops right there where you would T-bone someone on DeBarco if you couldn't stop there. And so we know that we've got some issues. So what we're asking the city to do is just protect us from having more and more and more vehicle traffic coming through. And from my perspective, if you look at what the city is trying to do in that urban reserve area, we're coming up against Highway 211 right now. And rather than putting a bunch more traffic from another 100 homes, maybe another 1,000, 1,500 trips, whatever they would create for their size, instead of running that through our little streets that can't handle it, that weren't, I guess, built sufficiently to handle that, we're saying, hey, why don't we look at an urban growth boundary expansion? Let's build out a road like Gunderson. Let's have this subdivision in, and then let's think about the next subdivision that's going to tie into that one and make sure that we have, because we're going to continue to build south, and we're going to continue, that's where our reserve area is. We can see it coming. On both sides of 211, we're going to keep getting built out. So why not make it so that now all of this new subdivision traffic comes out onto 211? It makes the most sense because 211 is a road that can handle it. 211 is a road that comes responsibly around our city on both sides. And that's really where we want to move the majority of traffic from my perspective, rather than through our little streets. So we're just asking you, I'm all for it. I'd love to see it built out. I'd love to see more built out, but it has to be not at our expense of our safety of our citizens that are here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, appreciate it. Further proponent testimony? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna move on to opponent testimony. Seeing no opponent testimony, any additional questions from the audience?
I thought there was gonna be Kathleen Walker, 15920 Southeast Bluff Road. I thought there was gonna be a category of neither supportive or against it. So if you want
So here we are, huh?
If you wanna put me in a category, you can put me there. What I wanna know is, this all kind of boils down to who's paying for the road. Do we know that yet? And can I get an answer to that question? It's a pretty key part of the decision that you're making tonight. Do we have is that something we can get an answer to?
Are we able to provide answers to that question?
We don't have certainty on that. That will be something that come the 16th, that's the plan, that they'd be considering the development agreement, which would lay that out, but we don't know yet, no.
Because if they're paying for the road as they should, then I'm supportive of it. If we're paying for this road, for this expansion, then, I'm not quite so excited about that, because that's coming out of all of our pockets, and we really do feel developers should pay for development. The other thing that kind of just blew me out of the water, I don't know if y'all caught it, but all of a sudden, we started talking, Kelly mentioned about the parkland dedication policy. And this, which my understanding is not part of this UGB expansion. That this is a UGB expansion. It's not having to do with the parkland dedication policy for Bailey Meadows. And I believe, I'm not a lawyer, got one sitting in the room, two of them sitting in the room, but I would tend to say that the parkland dedication policy, here's what I know about it, is that this developer said that not only do they want to do a fee in lieu of, that they don't want to dedicate land, they want to do a fee in lieu of, but their case was also that we didn't have the right. Even though our code says, at the city's discretion, the city can decide to either accept land or a fee in lieu of. They argued that it wasn't at our discretion, and it was their decision to make. So they all along had been saying a fee in lieu of. Then at this last minute, and we'd heard about this parkland thing, but then at the planning commission, and I don't know, again, tell me if I'm getting myself into hot water here, but at the planning commission meeting, it was pointed out to them, after everything had been closed, it was pointed, I believe it was almost closed, anyways, it was pointed out to them that the parkland did not meet the criteria for parkland in our code. And did they want to ask for a variance for that? Meaning the houses do not face the park, and there's several other code mentions in there that this dedication does not meet. And they said, no, they didn't want to go for a variance. And so what my understanding of that meant was that this was not a parkland dedication as required under our code. This was just kind of some extra land they had, and they're going to donate it to the city, and the city can develop it as parkland if we want or not. Because then they don't have to make the homes face the park or anything like that, or meet any of the other criteria. So if all of a sudden this UGB expansion starts mentioning in the process that now this is not only, some parkland, but it's also taking the place of the fee in lieu of that they had already agreed to pay, then I guess I just want to know about that and be clear about that, because that's gonna change a few things going forward. So,
Kelly,
can't have it both ways.
Kelly, are we able to provide some background to that question at this time?
I can provide a little background. I think we're starting, in my opinion, to skate on the very close
Why I turn to you guys.
hearing from
You're the one.
16th.
You're the one that brought it up, though. That's why I just about dropped my jaw when because it should be part of the UGB expansion.
Kathleen, let's
I'm
let-
sorry.
let's
You're
let
right.
him answer,
I
please.
apologize.
Yeah.
I think it's starting, I think some of what Ms. Walker's talking about is starting to get close to what's going to be heard on the 16th, in my opinion, but I'll leave that to David to decide.
So, how I would characterize, I don't think that the issue of the parkland and whether the city accepts the dedication as is proposed and as is reflected in this UGB expansion, because, or whether it's the fee in lieu, is something that's germane to what you will hear on the 16th. That is absolutely.
It is germane?
It is, yes. It will be part of the decision that you will, it's part of the appeal. It's part of what the planning commission decided. The planning commission decided to say, as part of their conditions, that they accept the dedication, subject to the UGB expansion happening, and if that didn't happen, then there would be a fee in lieu. That's one of the conditions in that.
Kathleen,
So
I think we're gonna have to talk about it in a week.
My point is that when you start bringing it up and making it part of the UGB expansion, then it becomes part of the UGB expansion. If it's just they're donating some land, that's part of the UGB expansion. If we're talking about what that counts as and all that, that's a matter for the 16th. And so my point is that, you know, it's either part of the 16th or it's part of today. And I agree with you, I think it's part of the 16th. But my point is that I don't believe it should be brought up in as part of the UGB expansion, that it's counting towards one or the other. It's just they're donating land. There's some land there that hasn't been decided what's gonna happen with it and what it's gonna count as. You know, they can donate it or whatever, but I guess that's my concern, is that you're making a decision that is really to be made at the 16th. And, cause, yeah.
the merits of whether it's something that the city accepts as dedication for parkland, or whether the city takes a fee in lieu, or something in between, how that land is dealt with relative to your parkland dedication requirements is the 16th. That's when that will happen. What this is just recognizing the fact that the Planning Commission's decision, what you will be hearing on appeal on the 16th, has a condition of approval that says the parkland will be dedicated, this 2.3 acres. In order for that to happen, it has to be part of the UGB expansion. You can't have an urban park outside of the UGB. So this is just setting the stage for allowing that possibility. But whether it happens or not is going to be dependent upon what now you will decide on the 16th.
And on the 16th, we can go into in greater detail about Chapter 1786 and the provision that Ms. Walker's citing.
Okay.
Well, and, yeah.
It does. This is not.
Appreciate
This
that.
does not
Yeah.
resolve the issue of whether there's going to be a dedication or whether there's going to be a fee in lieu. It basically just says if there is going to be a dedication, this allows it to happen.
Well, I'm just telling you what the Planning Commission, you know, what they decided was that, you know, that there was gonna be a fee because they didn't wanna have a variance. They said, when asked, Don Carlton said, do you want a variance? Because, you know, we'll probably give it to you, but they said no, they didn't want a variance. So, anyway, my concern is that, I guess we'll bring that all up, and that'll all be de novo. That'll be more to add to the record, but I'm concerned then, you know, that you don't know, you're making the decision, you don't even know who's paying for the road. You're, you know, kind of implying that this is good parkland, it's wet, and there's the development requirements in 17.86 for sidewalks and grading and all that has not been mentioned as part of the deal at all. So there's a whole lot of loopholes that, again, this, you know, I kind of want to assume that, you know, you want to do the right thing and work with us. And then I just see this kind of stuff and it just makes me wonder. I'm not quite sure about where you're going with this. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate the
Thank you,
comments.
Kathleen. Appreciate it.
I didn't know there was another category, just.
Well, I mean, that was for questions. So if you have a question from the audience, but we're not gonna give statements.
My question is, so I guess my support or non-support is contingent, because there's a lot of contingencies with this project, upon who pays for it. Who's gonna pay for the intersection? Who's gonna pay for the road up to the property? I don't wanna subsidize the developer. I don't wanna pay for his new Porsche. This is a $50 million project. And I think I speak for a lot of residents, especially with the taxes going up, the wastewater, the water, everything else. I don't wanna give this guy money, straight up, okay?
Thank you. Okay, any opponent testimony? Actually, I apologize, we're through that. Any more additional questions? Seeing none, we'll move on for the staff recap recommendation.
Yeah, so I'll go into a few of these things. I agree with Ms. Finley and Ms. Duncan about safety being a huge concern and a huge reason for why staff all along since the meeting in September, which was in the library, was pushing for a second access into this subdivision, and not just for the subdivision, but a second access for all future development kind of in this portion of town that's by Highway 211. So I'm glad they were here to speak on behalf of that, because I do want to stress that's a very important part of it. I do want to clarify a few things that I think there was a little bit of misinformation that was passed during a few of the testimonies. We did actually recently, within the last 5 years, study our entire UGB. We expanded it in 2017. The reason why this property was not included is because the 2011 Transportation Systems Plan did not properly evaluate the alignment of Gunderson Road. And therefore, when we made the expansion analysis in 2015, 2016, and ultimately expanded the UGB in 2017, our assumptions were that the TSP that was done in 2011 by DKS and ODOT actually assumed the correct location and intersection. We've since learned that that is not the case. So when we go through the TSP update that we're going through pretty soon now, we're going to be making sure that any large arterials or collectors that intersect with other arterials or collectors, including any of the highways, Highway 26 or 211, are even potentially feasible within the conceptual alignment areas, so that when we do our next UGB expansion in 10, 15 years, that those areas can actually accommodate road intersections. So we made assumptions that just to reiterate, the 2011 alignments were feasible. It turns out, I guess they were not. So that's what happened there. But we did recently do the UGB expansion. We're not anticipating on doing another one anytime soon. I will say that in 2024, by the end of 2024, we have to complete our housing needs assessment again per House Bill 2003. So at that time, you'll be finding out in about 4.5 years where we're looking at for housing and economic development lands and employment lands, essentially. So we'll know a little bit more in about 4 to 5 years on that. Mr. Lane is correct that I think he quoted it as a UGB exception process, which wasn't applied for. I believe he meant a goal exception process through the county. As Mr. Goodell on the applicant side already stated, they did not apply for a goal exception process through the county. They did talk to county staff. County staff gave them a less than lukewarm kind of anticipated approval on it, so they were not very supportive of it. But Mr. Lane is correct that that goal exception process was never actually went through it. So instead of going through that goal exception process, the applicant is going through the UGB expansion process that we're before you today with. Who pays for the road? As we've already said, that's still to be decided. I think that was asked by Mr. Lane and Ms. Walker. Developers paying for development. What I can say to that is I think there were some policy changes in the last year by council that we kind of changed some of our policies around development always paying for itself. And then I also just want to point out that even if you put in Gunderson Road here, I just want to be very clear that a lot of other future developments will also benefit from this road going in, and also benefit from the intersection improvements occurring, such as safety when you're coming in onto 11, and then also for an alternative transportation route for the Nicholas Glenn folks and for other people along the Barco Road. So I think it is a little unfair to say that the only person or people benefiting from Gunderson Road would be the development, the 100-lot subdivision. I think it's much greater than that. Again, the parkland dedication, there's some information in 1786 that I can go into more on March 16th, but I think some of our code language in there needs to be updated because I don't know, well, I'll just wait on that. And then the variances for the houses facing the park, we can also go into that more on March 16th as well. And I don't know if David had anything to add to.
No, I was just going to tie that loose end on the parkland. I think all those specific issues are germane for your appeal on the 16th.
Okay. Rebuttal by applicant. No rebuttal? Okay. Call for a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second. There's a motion to close the public hearing and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Carries. Discussion.
I have a question for staff about the impact on the UGB balance. What's commercial, what's single family, and how we move from where we were before this particular amendment would be in place. How would that affect if it were to be approved?
Yeah, it would have no impact on that balance. balance, because that balance is only for residential and commercial lands. And because once this is annexed, it would be restricted solely for public facilities and parkland, it would actually have a zero net effect on our balances currently.
Any other further discussion? Everybody leaning towards expansion?
I am.
I am.
I appreciate the public comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Obviously, I think we all wish that we were right in the middle of the hearings, so that we could just be, in it. But this is an important step, so I'm looking for a motion.
One thing, this is one of those situations, Mayor, where you have an ordinance that'll be the ultimate thing you're voting on. So if there's no more discussion on it, what I would suggest is,
First reading?
calling for the first reading, and then someone can move to adopt the first reading.
All right. Call for the first reading.
This is ordinance number 2020-03, an ordinance adopting an urban growth boundary expansion analysis and comprehensive plan amendment for the city of Sandy.
I move that we approve the first reading of ordinance 20-03.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion by Councilor Exner, a second by Councilor Peitzold, that we approve the first reading of ordinance 2020-03. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So since it was unanimous, you could call for the second reading tonight if you were so inclined.
I will call for a second reading.
I have a question.
Yep.
Why does it say ordinance 2020-03, but then it's 20-002?
That's the land use file number.
That's the what?
That just happens to be the land use file number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just didn't want there to be a typo.
2020.
Please proceed.
Ordinance number 2020-03, an ordinance adopting an urban growth boundary expansion analysis and comprehensive plan amendment for the city of Sandy.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion to accept the second reading of ordinance 2020-03.
Second.
I'll second.
So motion by Councilor Smallwood, a second by Councilor Schultz, that we accept the second reading of ordinance 2020-03. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you. Moving on to new business. Scope of review for the March 16th appeal of Bailey Meadows subdivision.
Okay, so in your packet, you do have a memo from me regarding this issue. Your code has sort of a process. I think it's something, again, that, like other things that we've been talking about recently, that we can look at in a future code update. It's a little clunky. But that is that the city council makes a determination about whether it considers an appeal on the record or it considers an appeal de novo, or frankly something in between, where you could allow some new evidence and testimony but not hear the whole hearing brand new. Historically in Sandy, those few times that the city council has had land use appeals, they don't happen that often, which is nice, but the council, previous councils have decided to hold the hearing de novo. Since I've been here, that's been the tradition of councils. The reason being, as I talked about in the memo, that I believe there's good cause to do that because at the local level, I've been through a few of these. Sometimes it goes just fine. Sometimes it can be extraordinarily difficult to manage an on-the-record appeal. I don't think it's coincidental that the more controversial or complicated an appeal is, the more difficult that process becomes. So, if it's something fairly straightforward and quote-unquote routine, I think having it on the record is just fine. But by the nature of how your code is set up, you only really get to hear land use matters typically because it is something that's complex or controversial, because it's an appeal, except for things like this tonight with the UGB. So that's why I would recommend doing it de novo. It's what can happen is if it's on the record, then there can be disputes about whether an issue was adequately raised below, where in the record the issue might be raised. And I got to tell you, trying to do that in the midst of something that is already a complicated matter, and one that, you know, naturally generates a lot of interest and discussion, and I think in many cases, with respect to this application or others like it, a lot of confusion and a lot of maybe, you know, people get you know, upset about what is or isn't being done, and how that plays out. And I think having it just be a hearing like any other that you can have, and you can just hear from folks, and we aren't spending time navigating whether an issue's been raised, whether it's in the record, who raised it, who gets to testify, is a better use of our time, just to have a hearing that is open, and you can not have to be considering those issues, or staff and myself would not be considering them either. So that's the basis for it. I would, I know, as I said earlier, the applicant did have a letter that he submitted today. I would offer the applicant some, my recommendation would be to give them a minute or two, not a lot of time here. We're just talking about the scope of the review, and also either of the appellants that are here tonight, if they want to speak to this issue as well. I think that's fair.
Why don't we go ahead and do that now? Is there anyone that would like to provide testimony on this? Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thanks, Mayor, members of council. My name is Michael Robinson. The last name is spelled R-O-B-I-N-S-O-N. Mailing address is 1211 Southwest 5th Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland 97204. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. I need about a minute, and I'll try and take less if I can. So I don't disagree really with anything David said. I understand how difficult on the record versus de novo hearings can be. But I have three things I'd like this council to think about, and our request is that you hold an on-the-record hearing, not de novo, and here are our reasons. First of all, the Planning Commission held not one but two public hearings where folks were able to testify, and there was a period really between December through February where the record was open. There was lots of opportunity to put in evidence. Allowing a new hearing effectively where you can put in new evidence just doesn't seem right to us, because we're faced with the burden of proof. Always the applicant has the burden of proof. We think the record was fairly made by everybody, us and our neighbors, and there's no need to reopen it. Secondly, I want to compliment your staff. One of the things David's right about is many local government records are really poor examples of record keeping in terms of evidence that's come in and what issues have been raised. If you look at the staff reports to your Planning Commission that are part of your record, the staff record keeping was exemplary in this case. We know exactly what the documents were. We know what the issues raised were. Staff did a very nice job both in keeping track of the documents and in addressing the issues. So generally, David's right. Local hearings that are on the record can be difficult to sort out what's in and what isn't. I don't think you've got that problem here because your staff did such a good job of doing that for you. And lastly, and at the risk of confusing people, I'll just say, the subdivision application is a needed housing application. State law says it has to be subject only to clear and objective approval criteria. The criteria the council is using, well, let me paraphrase, let me tell you what the statute actually says. It says you can only apply clear and objective conditions, standards, and procedures. The procedure for granting a de novo versus an on-the-record hearing is subjective. And so I think you should just stick with the on-the-record hearing for that basis. I don't disagree with anything David said. I just think in this case the merits are in favor of holding an on-the-record hearing. And we hope that's what you do, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further testimony?
Maybe I misunderstood what was just said, but I thought he said that, again, the clear and objective stuff, I've done a lot of research because I didn't really have a good handle on what all that meant, but those have been around for years and years, and so that's not anything new. Unlike what was been told before, it's like there was something that just came up that we had some loopholes that just came open. It's not. Our code has been clear and objective all along, and has served us well. I believe that what I just thought I heard was that, well, the decision to whether or not to make it de novo or on the record is a subjective decision that you all is not clear and objective. maybe I didn't hear that right, but that's what I understood it to be. Again, I think that what is at stake here is what I heard tonight was just a kind of a continuing confusion about what was actually decided in the Planning Commission hearing. And things have all of a sudden, what I thought was on the record that group worked to appeal is now changed. Some of the requirements and things like that have changed. So I'm not quite, I'm concerned that going on the record when there are apparent changes according to the staff, planning staff, I'm concerned about that. So I would think it's very important for you all to make sure that we're all aware of what those changes are and go ahead and make this de novo hearing so that we can all understand, and if there's a need to, again, add some additional input because some decisions or other things have changed, we want the opportunity to do that. So we'd really appreciate it if it was de novo. Thank you.
Further? Welcome. Please remember to state your name and address.
Gigi
Over
Duncan.
and over.
18275 Rachel Drive. So I think I speak for a lot of people. We don't know all the terms and things that you guys are using. There's a lot of legalese going on, and I can't pretend to understand it all. And I have to admit, this has been quite an education for me just from the beginning of this, trying to understand what's happening. But I can tell you that I'm a reasonably fairly intelligent person, like the other people here, and I am very confused about a lot of what's happening with the application. I feel like every time we come to a meeting, things have changed. We've gotten information in a way that I can't understand or digest it, and I keep feeling like things are changing and it's just sort of moving along, and we're just kind of holding on, trying to go, wait a minute, what's happening? And so I don't see any reason why safety would be considered subjective. I think, I don't know, it's the Hippocratic Oath, and my oath from my particular business is first do no harm, and I think maybe some of you in this room have that same thing. And thou shalt not, these types of things. I mean, if it's a commandment, it's probably pretty important. And so I'm just saying, I don't really see that as subjective. I think that we should all have a chance to come out and say, this is what we consider, safe. And now that we have a little bit more information, give us a chance to come up and say something and say, hey, this is how this is affecting us, and we're asking you to look at this. So we could really use the help.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have to say our name and.
Yeah, I gotta do it.
Makoto Lane, 37828 Rachel Drive.
Thank you.
From what I heard was basically the attorney doesn't want any more testimony or evidence brought up in a situation that's fluid and continues to change. So I think in all fairness, when things start to change, whatever zoning is, exceptions, contingencies, all this stuff, that the public should be able to have a voice, along the process. Closing it would take away the public's voice. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Richard Sheldon, 37552 Rachel Drive, Sandy, Oregon. So I have more of a question. Mr. Robinson pointed out that our city did an excellent job in records keeping. It's a little over 1,000 pages, good job there. But I would also offer that there's a plethora of testimony that was raised that isn't documented in written testimony, i.e. oral testimony. And so my question, I guess, would be, if we do an on the record, would that require the council to go back and review literally all the planning commission meetings before to make sure that that testimony is at least heard, recognized, as well as applicable?
So first, that testimony is all part of the record, certainly. And you would have presented to you, either way, whether it's on the record or de novo, the full record of the Planning Commission's hearing. Normally, the obligation is to be looking at the minutes of the hearing, but all the audio would be there, so that's something that you could choose to listen to as well. But that just because it was delivered orally doesn't mean it's not part of the record. It would be.
Okay. Thank you. Further testimony? Okay. Discussion. Let's hear it all.
I'll start. I feel like for me, I ran for city council to hear from the people and to raise issues to me directly. So it doesn't really work for me to read through 1,000 pages of something that was said to someone else. So I'm in favor of the de novo hearing.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yep. Counselor?
I agree with Commissioner Schultz. I think that this is an important decision for the community, and we need to hear what we need to hear.
Yeah, I've been through a few of these over the few years, not as long as some people have been in the city council, but working on it. And it's not
Is
been
he the oldest still though?
That's twice. He said that tonight. At least indicated. Sorry, it's a joke from way back.
Way back.
Way back, yeah, at least it's 6
Yeah.
months. Anyway, in the past, we've not had any troubles with making it de novo. It's one of those things where if there's some new subject comes up, I'm more than happy to look at it and see if it is, in my mind, applies to the decision to be made. And I think it's more than applicable that we think about what we're bringing from our public and that we listen to what they're saying. And I really wouldn't want to have somebody cut off because we felt like the record was complete. There may be something else out there. And I don't see it as an issue on either side. So to me, we should move forward with the de novo, the new record. Not record, but de novo.
I wouldn't have anything to add to that, so I agree.
Yeah.
with it, so.
Counselor Piesel?
Yeah, I think, one, we have to take consideration of our lawyer and what we've paid him to recommend us to do, and we do respect their comments and advice, and he's been doing it a very long time, longer than I've been on council or on planning commission, so there you go.
3 times now, okay.
But, you know, we've done this in the past, and we have done it de novo, and it's I know why some councils may not want to do that in other cities, in other places, because, you know, it takes up long nights. I enjoy the long nights with especially,
There's not gonna be maps, so.
planning, because that's where both Carl and I started, was on planning a long time ago. It's hard to see the whole picture without it. Unfortunately, I will not be here at that meeting, so I will be out of town. But I do believe that the de novo is the correct way to go.
I agree with everything that's been set up here. So, let's go ahead and get a motion to that effect.
I make a motion that, I don't know what I make a motion for, that the review, is it written for us?
Review for the March 16th appeal of the Bailey Meadow subdivision would be de novo.
Yes.
Yeah, de novo hearing.
Make a motion as stated.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Pietzold, a second by Counselor Smallwood. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for your testimony. Next item on the agenda, intergovernmental agreement with the city of Lake Oswego. Well, I'm gonna pause here for any folks that would like to head home.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Tough crowd.
And thank you for your testimony.
Sorry, Chief, you get that in your interest.
After hours records.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Gigi.
Can we get you to come back on the 16th?
Becky, 258 pages is what it was. You've talked about the record for tonight?
Yeah, the whole policing thing.
Oh, that's
I
only,
do
that was
the
only.
policing thing, I read that.
Oh.
The Arts Commission agenda, so
Okay.
so you're out.
She is on the art
All right.
commission.
Let's carry it forward. IGA, City of Lake Oswego for the police record services. Chief, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Yeah, I'm sure all of you went through the staff report already. It's fairly, this is nothing like the last item we had. That's pretty hard to follow. It's pretty basic. This service that's been provided by the sheriff's office for years. You saw the letter that I got back in September. This is something that was discussed also a couple years prior, and ultimately didn't happen. There was a little bit of blowback, for lack of a better term, from other administrators, and it just didn't happen. And this time it obviously did happen, so, when we got this news, it was a bit of a shock for us because we didn't exactly know how we were gonna, perform these functions and, have these things done in the off hours when our business office is closed. But, the city of Lake Oswego and their chief graciously, offered this agreement. And the last couple months, we've been working on this, and I'm really excited that they decided to step forward and do this, because I really didn't know how we were gonna get it done otherwise. The other option for us would have been to, go to, possibly the city of Gresham, or, with their agency, and, or BOEC, the, dispatch service and, records, management for the city of Portland, which I think would have been a much greater cost. So, or have our own people do these after hours, and that's something that we just didn't have budget for, so. Does anybody have any questions? A lot of the stuff in here, the LEDs entries and the NCIC stuff, maybe you're not familiar with. I can answer any questions about that on why this is, so critical for us.
Seems like a slam dunk to me. Anybody else?
Why did they stop?
I don't really have an answer for that. I would just be guessing, so I'd really rather not do that.
I don't want you to guess, but it just seems.
Might be part of their cuts that they're trying to make across the
Yep,
board right now.
That would be my suspicion as well.
Would have
There's-
loved to have that in the letter.
Well, there's a little bit of some acrimony, I think, between
Yeah.
the sheriff's department and the county right
And
now.
there's some implied.
I understand.
Enough said. I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it just seems a little.
I do have a question for the chief.
Yes.
Does the Lake Oswego department feel like this is something they could conduct for quite some time? That there would be a time when their cuts might be limiting this, or something that might make it so that it may be more difficult for us to do this than what we have now? Because I'm assuming that the process will be very similar to what the counties has been all along. So I think you talked to me about being just a few a week. So we want to make sure that we don't, somewhere down the road, have Lake Oswego say, whoop, this is not going to work for us. So how strong is that?
There was quite a bit of discussion about this during the last few months on, could they handle all this? And you can see in the agreement that there are priorities that they have, of course.
Mhm.
And that's not just with the Lake Oswego Communications. That would be, you'd see that priority list pretty much
Sure.
in any other, communications dispatch services. So they did feel like they didn't have any problem with that, with those priorities in place, such as you'll see taking 911 calls, of course, they come first, and then as you go on down the list, what you see at the bottom is our records entries. Unless those records entries are, say, a missing person that's, a juvenile, or things that require us by law to have entered into a certain period of time. So those are up higher on the list, but they felt that they could do this with the people that they have now, and they didn't have a problem with it. So I don't see any issue with it now. I have a great working relationship with Lake Oswego, and I think if there was a problem, that it would be communicated to me in a timely fashion, so we could make other arrangements.
Right.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
Do we need to approve this? All right.
I got a quick question.
All right, Councilor Smallwood.
Chief, do you think, as far as the level of service, do you expect that you're gonna get the same level of service as you were getting with the county?
I've heard since Jordan left Lake Oswego, it's just falling apart. You sure?
And that may be a really hard question to answer,
Yes, in
but
fact,
I'm sure that's gone through
there's-
your mind. I'm just
actually,
curious.
We will get the same level of service, and
Okay.
there's a couple things that changed that Lake Oswego and my records manager had pointed out that needed to happen that weren't happening through the county. A couple things that could have been CJIS violations that they weren't, but that we felt like the city of Lake Oswego Communications were really on the ball, so to speak, to make those types of things happen as far as teletypes, timeliness, and things like that. That kind of, they were happening, but they weren't happening as quickly with the other service.
Okay, and then my last question, and it doesn't really bear anything on my decision, but what was the county charging us?
They weren't.
Oh, okay.
That's probably why they don't wanna do it anymore.
Yeah, but they could,
Well, there was some discussion, so
Yeah, no, it's okay, that was kind of my suspicion, so.
We do pay a fee for dispatch services.
No, I recognize that, but yeah.
So, and there was some discussion about how that should have been, part of that.
Sure.
fee, Let's say, so
Sure.
there was a lot of discussion
Yeah.
around that during the last couple of weeks.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are you ready, Counselor?
Oh, I had a couple questions. Was one, this goes till 2021, which is just a year and June 2021. So will we be looking at this coming back to us here in more time to be able to make discussions or talk about that? When do we expect this to be back if this contract's only going till 2021?
David, did you see that portion of there? But I was gonna defer to David on that. I didn't think it would come back before the end of 2021.
So what I understood is that Lakeville wanted to have that flexibility to determine how it's working
See if
out.
it works. Yep.
Yeah, they wanted to have a date certain basically.
And I get that, but yeah, just wanna make sure that we're prepared or when that would be coming back to either renew with them or figuring out what to do. The other thing would be, this is for weekdays between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. and on weekends and holidays. What are the other cities that they were doing this for? Was Canby, Molalla, doing? Those are both rural cities that
They're also gonna use
Lake Oswego.
Lake Oswego.
Okay. So are they picking up everybody but the county now?
Yes. And for the city of Sandy, it's not, for example, we don't have municipal court warrants in our city, so, and what I was telling Carl before is, there's literally only, I'd say an average, I think of, my records manager already got an average, I think it was 7 per week, average entries. So it's a low number for the city of Sandy. Some of the other cities like Molalla and Oregon City, they have municipal court warrants that need to be entered. They take a little bit more time. So for us, it's not that heavy of a burden.
Okay. Motion?
Sure. I move that we authorize the city manager and attorney to sign the IGA between the city of Sandy and city of Lake Oswego.
Second?
Motion by Counselor Exner, a second by Counselor Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. Very appreciated.
Thanks.
Moving on to Planning Commission term adjustment, Jordan.
I'll let Jeff do the staff report in a minute. I just wanted to set the stage that this is an item that came out of Jeff's starting to review one of the goals from your review of the council rules, and in particular looking at our boards and commissions and term limits and terms. And one of the places that Jeff started was with the Planning Commission and doing a little research to make sure that the seats align with the positions and the term beginning and end dates. And he'll continue his work looking at other advisory boards that also need to have term limits and established, and particularly looking at research of when those terms began and what seat. So that takes a little bit of research work to kind of go back and see when the appointments occurred and what the dates were and what position it was for. So this one in particular is an adjustment that we found a date that was incorrect. So
Well, thank you, Jordan. So I'll just cut to the chase. I went back and reviewed the term beginning and end dates for the Planning Commission seats because I noticed that there was a discrepancy between the administrative records we have currently on the committee rosters and what had been, what had appeared in like kind of the historic committee rosters. You could tell it's a 4-year recurring term, and you could tell that at one point, approximately 2 years ago, it shifted by a year. It looks like it was just a typo that was then carried forward. But the problem was when the city council appointed one of the commissioners last year, they took the recommendation of staff to appoint him to a term ending on the wrong date. So technically, Commissioner Maiden's term has expired, but he intends, he would like to serve for the rest of the year. So our recommendation is that the city council go ahead and appoint him to the remainder of seat 6's term to expire at the end of this year. And at that point, then he can go through the regular reapplication process.
Okay. What if we chose to end a term by a year early? Is it the same process?
Well, I think that, it's the council's discretion to do that. It's our, it's like city policy that these are 4-year terms for these seats. Ultimately, that's your discretion if you'd like to defer to the experts here.
Well, I think there's a couple issues there. One, I think the code describes the terms as 4-year terms, right? So I don't know if your question is, can you shorten the term by a year?
Sure.
As opposed to removing a member from one of those positions.
Yep.
I think those are two different issues. I think that
Or the same.
Yeah, well, by code, you have, each position has a 4-year term for a planning commissioner.
The term, if you wanted to shorten terms, I think the way to do that would be go into the code and write a different term. And that would need to be prospective.
And what's the process for the removal of a planning commissioner?
So under state law, the planning commissioners have a sort of a unique process. And under state law, it would be removal with a hearing for cause.
Okay.
And what makes cause? Define that for me, if you could, at your best.
Statute doesn't. Certainly, I think things that come to mind are, let's say, consistently missing meetings, not showing up. I suppose being, disruptive during a meeting, doing something that would be unlawful, that would certainly be for cause. I'd have to look at it though to see if there are any cases that have actually interpreted that.
When I review our council rules and policies, when a counselor or a member of the hearing body decides to declare a conflict of interest, is it in our rules or our policy that they are to excuse themselves from the hearing? Because I have read that in one of our rules or our policy.
I need to look at that more closely, but what the general rule is, what state law would require is that you can't stay on the dais. You step down. So there's nothing that, from a state law perspective, that says somebody's got to leave the room. Most times that happens in my experience. The best practice is to sit back in the audience.
Isn't there a portion of our council rules, though, that states that?
We can dive into that.
Yeah, I'd like to. Especially after some of what I've witnessed this evening.
I try and think,
I'm pretty
in the
curious.
past, when I was on planning commission, if there was, and there was
Right there.
times when there was a conflict of some kind. In fact, I was on conflict. I can remember once making that decision. It was we just sat them in the audience someplace. And, it was quietly, just sat there, and they were not to be involved in any kind of manner. But I don't know that we had any kind of specificity. You had to leave the room or sit in a certain spot, but you couldn't stay on the dais.
I'm trying to remember where I saw it. If I saw it in our rules or if I've seen it in when you and I went to that ethics training and it was discussed there possibly.
My understanding is when we've done it in the past, long time ago, was to sit down in the audience because it's still a public meeting, so you're not needing to leave the public meeting, it's still a public meeting. No.
Does not say you have to leave? Okay. And you're looking at rules or?
We're looking at the council rules.
Or policy, okay. And does the council rules govern the planning commission, or do they have their own set of rules?
No, these are the council rules.
Council rules, okay. Yeah.
So it does or does not say you need to leave?
It does not.
Okay.
I only want to address this because it's affecting the planning commission and the liaison, the staff liaison for that work. So I don't want to get into the potential conflict of interest or the individual I assume you're talking about. I would like to just chime in and say I would highly encourage to extend Mr. Bain's term. He's been a phenomenal addition to the commission. He's very well read and always comes very prepared to the meetings with lots of great questions. So I just want to speak on that and just reassure everybody on Mr. Bain that I would really like to see that extended.
Yeah, I was part of that. I was part of that committee and was very satisfied.
I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that.
I just try to think the difference between everybody being on 21, the 4 being on 21, and then 2 being on, retiring on the 20, and then 1 on the 19, leads to some variances of experience. And I think that was the reason for the 20 expiring on 1 year, and then the next year being the rest of them. And that gives everybody a chance to be some experience on this, and having it a varied of a year does some of that, but I don't know if it might lead to some confusion about who is going to be getting that particular shortened version.
Oh,
or
no, I think
time
we should
off.
extend Mr. Meek.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'd like to see them all, either 21 or 20 on this chart here.
Am I wrong in understanding it was just, the term that he's in for 6 should be by code until 2020?
Should be. I want to be careful about the code issue. Actually, going back through it, we used to have language in the code
That's right,
saying
that
it
was
needed to be
pulled out.
4 years. It's not in the code anymore.
Just by
It was
date, though.
repealed a couple of years ago in 2018. So there is actually currently nothing that says 4 years. That's why I chose to use the words as city's policy. It looks like that's our practice.
Oh,
there
so we
are-
can set the expirations to whenever we want.
There may be, though.
I mean, I would like to check the city attorney.
I think we
but-
want to be, there was also a set of, by resolution, the council adopted, essentially took all that stuff out of the code and put it into a resolution.
But
And
the
resolution doesn't speak to the terms.
The resolution specifically applies to advisory boards, but not commissions.
Okay.
So that,
Oh,
yeah.
got you. Big
Okay.
difference.
So,
Counselor?
well, so I think what it sounds like to me is we need to find out in further depth what constitutes a conflict of interest. And then what type of action we have.
Well,
with
It
something like
could
that.
be, but this is not about conflict of interest. This is just about date of termination.
Well, but there's that piece, but I'd also like some further information on what constitutes a conflict
Oh,
of
okay.
interest on the part of this commission, moving forward, so that we're all aware of what that is.
And I would, so while I'm in favor of extending this term, I would also like to reiterate council's wanting to review at the end of each term that position and to go out to, and this is for all positions, whether it be planning or parks or library, but to go out for an interview process at the expiration of people's term, and people, of course, are able to reapply for their term, and council will select an appointment at that time. But for this particular one, I do favor extending this out by another year.
I make a recommendation that we appoint Christopher Mayton to serve as planning commissioner for the remainder of seat 6 term expiring on December 31st, 2020.
And I'll second.
Motion by Councilor Peatsold, a second by Councilor Exner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Report for the city manager.
Do you want to address conflict of interest? We could do that later.
I think, yeah, we can look at it, certainly.
A couple things. We met last Wednesday with the work group on the next poll for the special district and circulated that questionnaire. Thank you for your comments. I haven't been able to respond individually to everyone yet, but some good comments. I want to clarify a couple things. One, the territory that we're looking at for that boundary of the proposed special district. The work group talked about including the Eagle Creek territory, and what that does is add an additional area of assessed value of folks that we surveyed already and were users of the pool and the community and potential community campus. That adds enough assessed value to drive down the proposed tax rate for a recreation district and for that proposal. The boundaries then on the east side would extend to Boulder Creek, not beyond.
Question was written
Yeah,
differently.
it was probably a little bit confusing on, was it west or east?
It said
The boundary is Alder Creek.
It said east of Alder Creek, so.
Yeah.
That's why I sent you the question.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll make sure that says, it extends to Alder Creek. Doesn't stop, it stops at Alder Creek, doesn't go beyond that. There's a question about the future of the pool and maybe making sure that language is flexible enough to talk about, be, if the district doesn't passes without maybe certain words being used.
So where are you landing on that?
There was some good suggestions that, just saying the pool would not be funded, would not be open and funded versus, actually having actionable words in that, question, and the rest of the council can provide some input on that, and how you're leaning. We talked about that in the work group, and kind of wrestled with it a little bit, and ultimately came up with that verbiage that's in there. We felt it was pretty clear, but we also want to be clear there hasn't been any decision about that, by the council yet, so, we didn't want to set that expectation and that we're gonna be held firm to that, but felt like it was powerful language.
That was clear.
Pretty clear.
Yeah.
So,
Sounded like
but
a
the
threat to
decision-
me.
Yeah. I saw your comment.
Yeah.
So just to kind of, I guess, give a little background on that, the original question was much more direct. We kind of massaged it to begin with, and I agree with what your comments were, wholeheartedly. But we also, for those of us that were sitting there, just had some concerns that we wanted clarity for the general public when they look at this survey, so that they do understand that hey, this is where we're at with this. We can't fund this, and so if we can't find funding for it, this is what we're looking at. And just to be really, I think in our minds, not to speak for the group, but just to be transparent and not try and hide anything, or lead people to believe that, hey, there's hope out there that we will fund it. So, so think on that, moving forward.
And really think about what this survey's asking, right? The survey's pretty straight up. This is not offering an aquatic facility that is totally expanded and like crazy. This is basically fixing the pool as is with slight modifications and enhancements, and then bare minimum operating the pool, right? And so if voters say no to that, I'm sorry, the pool's probably not gonna be around.
And along with that, it's it's a legal requirement that we put what will happen if it doesn't pass in the voters pamphlet. And so I want that to also be on the survey, so there's not a discrepancy between, well, I didn't know that was gonna happen versus when we actually got for the vote. So I just want it to be clear.
Jan brought it up. I emailed my stuff directly back to staff and thought that was appropriate, but I just wanted to be clear that we had a conversation about that statement, and agreed as a council on that statement, rather than three people, staff, thinking one way, but the whole council had a discussion on that. Not saying I agree or disagree on the statement. I just want to make sure that that was the consensus of the council.
Sure.
So where are we at?
It ended with likely. Remember, the word likely was added.
And that's why I wanted to add the word likely, because we don't know, what the council at the time will say.
All right, I'll reread it tonight. Okay.
On the assessed value question, the school district used a different number for the assessed value, and I'm exchanging some calls today. I wasn't able to get a confirmation on where they got that from. It might have been just because they included commercial and everything too, whereas we're looking at what a household, average would be, and their boundaries a lot bigger too, so they have bigger properties and stuff. My recommendation is still kind of keep it around a level that most people, can relate to, what their tax bill would reflect, and whether we use the actual average or median or a number that you can kind of extrapolate. So 200, okay, well if it's 300, do some.
Well, the average was pretty darn close to the median.
And then there was another comment about being clear about the building next to the pool and whether that's misleading for folks.
That was mine.
Yeah.
Because when I read the gymnasium in Cedar Ridge Middle School.
That was a worry for the committee as well.
Because that's how I read it when I was like, I'd like to talk about that, but I don't think I think you guys were thinking that it was the other building and not that one, but.
Well, obviously, yeah, but
It's
it's
one
hard.
of those, I don't know how it.
How do you
I don't know
how do you
how do you
explain it?
explain.
I
You know,
didn't
there are
even-
two buildings there, right? And so, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. The only other way that I could think of would be to put it out there and say, the building that doesn't have a gym. I mean, I don't know how else to,
Like, I mean,
to,
yeah, the
to-
only way
to
I can think
communicate
of,
that.
all right, take your phone, go down to the campus,
Google
walk back
Earth,
there.
Google
I mean,
Earth.
right, it's
Yeah.
tough. It's
Yeah.
tough. But I understand we had that exact same
We did,
conversation,
yeah.
Jeremy. I know.
So.
Yeah, and there might be a way not to be so specific about a building, you know, whether it's a remodel or renovate, but there would be a community center facility there or
Okay.
something, you
That
know,
might
more
be a good way to do
general,
it.
like,
Just make it more
you
general.
know, we might get into it and figure scrape it and build a new one or something, you know,
Yeah.
but, so.
I like that better.
For the community center?
No,
That's
just not
actually
be
a workable facility.
No,
there.
No, it just means the language.
Don't
The
put
language, it just
language
means the
about
language, just
not
making it more
being
vague.
specific
Oh.
on,
More
because
vague.
I don't, you're right, the building behind the
Yeah.
other building is,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
when you're looking south, it's the,
We're trying to
behind
get away
you,
from confusing
anyway,
people.
it makes it, that there is a building and it's not, you know,
Yeah.
necessarily that. So I think that would be more simpler, understood, when you're on a phone
Yeah.
and you're, you know,
Yeah, that makes
answering the
sense.
questions.
Are these question people, whatever they're called, survey people, are they gonna be able to say?
Our residents, our neighbors.
Are they gonna be able to
Maybe
say,
even you.
it's the
He's
building
talking about
behind,
that
no, you're
kind
welcome
of
to do it to me,
thing.
cause I make things confusing. So, and that's been observed a bunch. Are they gonna be able to say the building behind the building, or that kind of stuff, or is it, you have to say a certain specific, I noticed that the wording is what they read is what they read.
I kinda like Jeremy's idea
Yeah, I
of
do
just
too.
being more vague and just saying a building,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
Because if you start talking, somebody's gonna ask a bunch of
Yeah, 'cause-
questions.
well, and
Somebody's
it
not,
leads-
and pretty soon you have, you screw up your survey
I
response.
It leads to a
agree, and
perception, too.
Well, it does, because, so, I mean, and we've just seen a great example of it, right? Like, we thought when we were making the question, it was very clear which building we talked about, and when you read it,
Mhm.
you interpreted it as another building. So
Mhm.
there will be, everyone in this community will do
Mhm.
the same thing.
Yep.
So I like your idea of being more vague with that and just say,
Well, and it does give the opportunity for, some other ideas coming out of it that could happen, I don't wanna
It's
voice
not
them right
vague,
now,
though.
but they.
There will be a building.
yeah,
There's
exactly,
there-
just vaguer language,
Could be,
not as descriptive, maybe.
in partnerships that could happen, so anyway.
You will not get it perfect no matter what we do.
That, you are correct.
As close as possible. We'll make those small changes and circulate really quick, on a quick turnaround to get this out, so.
Great. Thank
You
you
say
for
you're
your
gonna
work
make
there.
a adjustment to the east and west of Aldo Creek?
Yeah, I think.
'Cause that one
it says-
really-
It says, in communities east of Sandy to Alder Creek.
Okay.
Is- Right.
I don't know why I read
Maybe
it.
you read it weird.
Yeah.
5 times that it was
Okay.
communities east of Aldo Creek,
Before or after lunch, I might.
so.
Before or after the glass of wine.
Today we received the scope and fee for 362nd. We're reviewing, but trying to get that on the council agenda.
Oh, I thought you said but, and it made me nervous.
No,
We're good.
it's within the range that we anticipated, but, so we think we can get that on your agenda. Next meeting will be pretty packed on the 16th,
Yeah.
just.
I won't be here, I wanna be here for that.
Yeah. Are you able to,
Watch it on internet, man.
get in on a phone or?
I'll be at a conference in DC.
Okay, oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I have meetings, yeah.
Okay, so we have to look at that agenda to make sure we don't overpack it or anything, but items, you know, contract approvals and stuff like that, we can probably take care of before we get into the hearings, which hearing could take, a good portion of
Yeah.
the night. And just a quick update, I've been sending updates on the coronavirus and what the city's doing to prepare, getting information out to our residents and of course our staff, send staff emails out and updates, and we're regularly getting updates from the county, and we're plugged into the CDC and what's going on there. But, you know, we're got signage out, we're encouraging our staff to, of course, stay home if they feel sick, and reviewing our sick leave policies and our work from home policies too, to be accommodating if we do have disruptions and people are, you know, impacted because of school closures and work closures and things like that. So tomorrow we'll be meeting to talk in more detail about our continuity of operations plans and
Who's meeting?
department heads.
Just us, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that we are thinking about and preparing for.
Have we had an opportunity to talk to the school district yet about
No, it's one of the
programs?
things that I've been playing phone tag with there.
And have we seen a shift in kind of the county's response since the news over the weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was emergency
Yeah,
response
they've been doing a good
today.
job. All weekend I was getting updates from county administration, so.
Because I have similar meetings in a different government and wearing a different hat, and one of the things that came up was, and maybe you just said it, I missed it, was the essential staff.
Mhm.
Have you identified the essential staff in our community that, things still have to,
Yeah.
water still has to flow,
Yeah.
things still have to work, the internet has to work, we have essential staff in certain areas? And are we
Yeah.
cross-training on that, so that if someone does have to be quarantined, that there's that piece?
Yeah, and it extends down to our contractors too. But yeah, in our emergency operations plan, we have essential staff identified, and depending on the type of emergency, right, things
Sure.
change.
It
But you're
changes.
right, we have contractors like Veolia that we need to make sure that they have redundancies. Fortunately, they're a big firm, so they can probably bring in people from other areas and stuff. But we need to treat water, drinking water, and we need to then treat that wastewater effectively, and not have things like that disrupted. But, and then also looking at specific plans too for things like transit, or what our policies are around making sure all the buses are clean, every day, disinfected, depending on how big this thing gets too. So
Utility workers and pipe breaks?
pipe breaks, we gotta have people on call in case the water main breaks. And
We've been talking about this a lot of work, because when you have maybe one person that does something,
yeah.
and now they're quarantined, or they're sick, or they're caught on the other side of a river and they can't get back, or whatever. Anyways, just,
you think about these things with our operations plan and everything, and now we have a chance where we're actually serious about, going through this scenario and the eventualities of what can happen, and making sure that we have people that are cross-trained and redundant skills throughout the organization. And then identifying things that, not essential, could we survive by closing certain facilities and offices and things like that, and still be able to pay bills and, effectively keep the government open.
Wash your hands.
Yep, keep washing your hands.
I know there's a number of cities with telecommuting policies. Do we
Mhm.
have anything like that?
Case by case, in each department, it kind of depends on the capabilities of, their type of work and how they set up. But it is a reminder for us that we probably should get more employees set up for that. One of the advantages that Sandy has is we're on the cloud within the Google environment, so that does provide us an easier access to work from remote locations. But we're encouraging employees to talk to their direct supervisor about that.
Yeah, and our system is still safe with people coming in with other computers and so forth.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
No committee reports, but I just want to do a shout out to Becky left, but the Arts Commission did a great forum over the weekend to get some public input about art, and I got a chance to look at her design for some of the art that she would like to see brought into town, and I look forward to hearing more about how that went and what information was gleaned. Same with the Parks Master Plan. I'm hoping to hear some good results from that meeting as well. Something that has come up in conversations around town lately seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about how the city is funded versus the school, and which money comes from where, and some folks were thinking that the school and the city are together on this district. I'm not sure what we can do about it, but I do wonder if a simple thing would be maybe in your newsletter, Jeff, if you could just do like a blurb about a simple how funding works, how taxes work at the city level, city versus school district, fire, the school bond versus what the city is doing with the district, just so we can see some clarity as all this stuff is gonna keep coming up, and it's being surveyed to everyone, and there's a lot of misunderstanding out there right now. So there's a little bit we can do to try to clear up some of that. That would be fantastic.
The details of compression and all that stuff.
Yeah, we gotta go that far.
We'll throw that in with urban renewal.
Yeah.
That's right.
And land use policies.
Put Jeff
Yes.
outside, put Jeff outside with a
Simple
billboard.
stuff.
That's it.
I gotta keep it real simple, short. Tyler, I saw you've got some interviews coming up this week, but I noticed, note that one of our folks are gonna be gone this week.
Yeah, I sent
What's
out an
your-
email notifying the 4 people that the interview this week is canceled. We've already rescheduled that
Okay.
for a later date in the month.
Okay.
19th, 18th.
All right. And I know that there's 2 now we're gonna have to end up
There are 2
looking
open
for.
positions,
Yeah.
correct.
So, okay. And that's it for me.
Jan?
Yeah, I met earlier this week with the mayor and with Jordan, and we talked about an ad hoc climate action plan committee or resilience committee, whatever we might choose to name it. And we talked about why we needed it. We need to be prepared for priority funding for transportation and other issues at both the state and federal level. And my notes just went away.
Yeah, you gotta.
Yeah, okay. No, it's not gonna work. But anyway, we're talking about first looking at the city's operation itself. What are the efficiencies and maybe cost savings that would come from that kind of plan? Then we want to work it into the county's plan, which will be available later. There are a number of reasons that there's a reason to move forward. And this would be mainly a staff-oriented committee. Lori and I would work with them. And Kelly and Mike Walker have offered some staff folks to work with us. We would take some of the other cities' plans and pull some things out that would be fairly simple so we can get moving on it. And then bring it back to the council. If the council felt it was necessary to go further to expand it out to the community or to make it a more permanent committee, that would be a council decision later.
I'll just I'll respond to it as thank you. Thank you, Counselor, for your leadership in this and really pushing the needle and keeping it in front of us. And, really kind of is, sustainability, whatever we want to call it, right? The first step is to look at ourselves as a city government. And so that's a big reason why staff is heavily involved, because it's staff departments and their actions and employees and everything that are really going to be looking for this and implementing it and everything else. So the way I look at it flowing, it was one of the reasons that both Councilor Lee and I advocated for the county to do a county-wide climate action plan, is because they're going to spend all their money, well, our money, right? But they're going to be spending their budget's money on the research and the consulting and stuff, and there'll be a lot of information off of that we can utilize what we like or leave behind what we don't. But there'll be a resource there for us down the road, and so while we wait for that process to play out, we're going to go down a path of kind of seeing what kind of actions we can take as a city government. So, does that make sense? Thank you again. Really appreciate it.
So do we have to do anything other than just
No
say
vote, we're doing it. We're doing it. Yeah.
That sounds
We're
good.
Is that it? Okay. Councilor Smollett.
Excellent. No committee reports either. The Parks Board will be meeting this coming Wednesday on the 11th, and I'll be going over term limits with them as well. So there'll be a continuation, I'm sure, of that conversation. You already kind of touched on the Parks public input, which I believe was last Thursday. It sounded like they had a really good turnout for that, but I wasn't able to attend, so.
30 or 40 folks attended.
Yeah.
There was a dot exercise putting priorities up.
Yeah.
And there's a survey online right now with the same input, questions for folks to kind of rate the priorities and
Good.
how much they use parks and things like
Good.
It
And
was
I'm not-
unfortunate, it was the same night as the
I
city
know. Everything
dinner.
was on the same
And a
night.
school
Yeah.
board
And school
meeting.
board.
Right.
So, and I haven't got any notification for when the next TAC meeting is for the master plan, but when I get that, I'll pass that along as
Please.
well. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Councilor Pietzold.
I think you might have already known, but I had a step aside from being on the interview committee. I actually know the person recommended them to the arts committee, so it probably wasn't something I should probably be also interviewing on. So as well for that. So.
All right, but I think this next person we all know.
That wasn't the person.
Okay. All right.
So that wasn't the person.
All right.
But times also weren't aligning as well. So just wanted to talk a little bit about, I mentioned it before, Tillamook County had gotten attacked. You might have read some of it in the paper. I actually haven't read it. I've actually got it firsthand from the county commissioner down there who sits on OBAC. They were without most of their systems for 3 weeks or so. Still getting some stuff back. They actually paid the ransom. So I want to really stress the importance of cybersecurity, and that our city should be looking at that. Maybe because I see it from a different lens in my job and my career, and how important it is, and how soft targets government agencies are, especially small government agencies. And Sandy is a small one. Other cities are, schools are, parks districts. All these things are small agencies. They don't have the resources in it, but there are a lot of steps that can be done and taken. And it starts here with policy. It starts with some of the knowledge there, and some of the things to do. I hear a lot of reasons why people don't do it is because it costs money, and they don't know what they don't know. From someone that knows this much about it, it's pretty scared. Definitely. We are so soft targets, and so we need to be talking about that. It hits home. I mean, there was 20 cities in Texas a few months ago hit on the same day. Tillamook also said there was 2 other cities hit at the exact same time. They were on the same day that were hit. So it's just not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when, and what can we do to do some of those things. I think that should be a subject matter, and I can help with some of that as well, of guiding you guys and where to start with that to help talk about that. Cyber incident response is something that should be taken, because it will just matter of when and how is that ran, and how is the here ran, as we talk about with school districts as well, with the school boards in theirs, because there's a lot of decisions need to be made, and made with insurance companies.
I was just gonna say, I can talk to the insurance. You got the risk management.
So, right, and how and who's responding, right? Because as we know in other things, insurance agents always want to be first to know if they're going to pay.
Well, we don't pay. It's a carrier.
No, not pay for that, but
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
pay for the remediation.
Yeah, yeah.
There are places that are out for 6 months. We know of a school district up in the Seattle area that got crypto-locked their phones to food services, to pay cards. How do people pay? How does your city run? So this is more internally, not the standing it as a ISP, but this is as a government agency that runs, and what we do with PII, personal identifiable information of our residents and who we are. I got to chair OBAC, Oregon Broadband Advisory Council, and we had the city of Portland come and chat, and I've worked with Beth Fox, who presented down there over the years, because in the past she's called me to talk about, well, how did Sandy do it? How did Sandy do it? And this isn't fiber to the home, but this is where we started with, is bringing more fiber out to their municipal buildings to save tons of money, and that's how a lot of our fiber got started on that. So it was really a lot of fun, interesting things that, even though they're doing the fiber there, in the future, Sandy may be able to take advantage of some of those routes, because they also have, which some of our citizens, our schools take advantage of, is the Bull Run Water, which is part of the city of Portland, which has fiber all the way out to the reservoir that comes up and goes down and be used. This coming Wednesday at 6:30 is the Economic Development meeting. So it'll be our 3rd meeting there. We'll be meeting in this room here. I'm excited for that to come. And then I want to also say how great it is. I know I haven't spoke much, and you guys are probably excited that I haven't brought up Sandy Net in a while. But, cause, you know.
Is that a 3 for 3 tonight?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just hitting it all, cause I'm not gonna be here at the next meeting, so.
Oh, that's what's happening.
Wanna make sure you feel the love.
Yeah.
But no, when it comes to, some of the stuff that we've been training for where I work, and what happens when people can't get to work? What happens when people aren't able to there? What happens when they can't get to Portland? What happens to that? And we built something amazing, and I know you guys all know this, but I wanna put it out there again, is people are able to work with great speed here, work from home.
Right.
In our city limits, at least, in that aspect of better bandwidth than they have there. So when we go to where we can't maybe drive, or what, if that were to ever have happened, you know, or be able to, something was shut down because of policy of a business saying, hey, we don't want people to come in like Nike has done, is, you know, you could work from home, out here in Sandy, which would be, you know,
And if you're quarantined, you want high-speed internet for Hulu,
Yes.
Prime, Netflix.
for all your
I'm
TVs,
just-
so you don't have to fight over,
movie needs.
for the
Right,
kids
just
on,
make
so
clear.
each kid wants something different.
That's the important part.
So anyways, that and the workforce they have, but also as the schools, I don't know what Oregon Trail is doing, I'm not speaking for them, but I do know other school districts and others are trying to figure out what they do for teaching kids at home and doing that. And we know the residents inside our city limits, here have that ability to have, you know, the world's fastest internet available to them, that connects to what they have, so, you know, that's a pretty big thing for city of Sandy on our side, so.
Great, thank you. A couple brief things for me. So we haven't had another C4 meeting since we last met, so no update there. But I do just want to comment and thank Councilor Lee for doing that with me and being kind of my buddy going to C4. You know, I've been kind of working the rural folks and working on that project. The reason I spoke on the climate action initiative was because of Councilor Lee and kind of getting into my ear and talking about that. So I've really enjoyed kind of our 1-2 punch there.
I
So
thought you just
thank
wanted
you.
someone to commiserate.
Yeah, right, yeah. Also wanted to mention the Estacada dinner that a few of us were at. It was a great dinner over there. They're doing amazing things. You know, really kind of the little city that could. It's amazing, only 3,500 people there. They've got a lot going on and a lot of really cool parks projects. You could just see the passion in their community. And what I loved is they not only did they have their plan, they also had, this is where we're gonna go for all the funding, right? So they were really dialed in, that they knew exactly what they wanted, where they wanted to go, and they have a plan on how they were gonna get there. So, just really proud of those folks. Wanted to talk to everybody and let you know that I have been talking to both Senator Chuck Thompson and Representative Anna Williams for a capital improvement ask. This is not something that has been a lot of thought and effort towards, but more of the politics are changing, not every day, every hour, really every second in Salem, and well, for a few folks outside of Salem right now, but wanted to really make sure that as negotiating and stuff was taking place, that our city was at the forefront with an ask where our representatives know what our priorities are. And so I worked with staff, and what we came up with was an ask for around $1 million for the 362nd Bell Street extension. We felt that was it was an ask that was kind of a not shovel ready, but kind of a shovel ready ask to make. And there were some exciting things that we could push as far as economic development, transportation needs, and all those kinds of things. So that's sitting out there. Both our representative and our senator and the governor's office all know about it.
So you're going down there Sunday night when they come back?
I don't know. Okay, so wanted to also say my daughter Lucy really enjoyed the acting for kids and teens workshop that the community center put on, and so just something to kind of remember. We just our staff does an amazing job of library and community center putting on different programs for our kids. Something really exciting about to happen that I need all of our help with is we are up for a grant from Blazers and MODA for a park enhancements over at Tupper Park. And it's us versus, I'm going to screw up the names, but multi-mobility and skills kind of a park. And so it opens up March 4th, but it's between us and Astoria And it's basically whoever gets the most activity and votes and everything to make this happen. The reason you haven't heard it pushed out more is Sarah Richardson is working, and we're just not getting a lot of information from MODA quite yet on all the different stuff. But luckily for us this is legitimately what my wife Mackenzie does for a living, right? So she's been working with Sarah to kind of put together a social media plan to push it out. We have some different service organizations, and the school district has agreed today that they're also going to be sharing it and trying to get promotion on it. And I've been in touch with the chamber and our different businesses that are social media heavy. So
You say March 4th?
Yeah, so we're talking like
Thursday.
Thursday. It's coming up.
Like
and
you
we're
have to
still-
vote on
So it
something?
might even get postponed. The voting's going to be open for 2 weeks though, so it's going to
Online?
be a 2-week online vote. Mackenzie and I are going to go out with our phone and do one of our stupid videos tomorrow. I hope it's not raining. I hope.
Hawaiian shirt, flip flops on the sides.
yeah, that's right. So we're gonna go do that. But so kind of, I'm gonna be sending out emails, social media. Please sharing it. Please get your networks to do it. An exciting opportunity for our community here. So stay tuned. On that, Jeff, I don't know if you have Mackenzie's email, but would you send me our the branding guide that came out that has our colors and all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
I don't know. She wanted it. Yeah, so just send it. Appreciate it. Coronavirus. Thank you, Jordan, for keeping up and working with the county on that. Obviously, we all need to stay comprised. Little scary seeing Oregon and Clackamas County mentioned in national news and getting those updates on your phone. So let's just make sure we continue to be aware of that. Arts and Park, which Councilor Schultz mentioned, great stakeholder meetings this past week. And then I'll just close out with the frustrating note that I'm on. I wasn't going to mention this tonight, but we did have a commissioner that showed up and sat next to developers on the applicant side here this evening. I understand that we all, in what we do, we may have conflicts of interest, and that we may have to recuse ourselves and to get up and walk off. But even though when we recuse ourselves, we're all leaders in this community, and we all have stature in this community. And when you go and you sit in the audience, it's one thing to go and sit in the back corner in the audience. It's quite another to go and sit by the developers that are paying your firm, and then while the rest of your colleagues sit here and see that happening and interact. I believe it's very hard to excuse that is somehow not sending a message to your commission. So I wasn't going to mention that tonight, but then I showed up this evening and I saw a very similar thing happening again, and I was very disappointed, and I'm very disheartened, and I'm very, quite frankly, angry about it, and I'm ready for that to come to a resolution. So thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting.
Executive session, correct?
Yeah. Executive session.